Is called to order. So, as most of you probably know, this is not the first hearing for the Senate bills on the agenda. But I'm conducting this hearing so that this bill that will be sponsored on the floor, I have the opportunity to hear directly from all of you and clarify matters as needed. And I'd also like you to get to know me better as the chairman of the Committee on Energy. The former position that I held was the chairman of the Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovation, and Futures Thinking. So with that background, I intend to look at the energy issues through the lens of futures thinking. And this is really important because you all know better than me. I'm certain, I guarantee that you all should know more than me. You all know that the energy issues require long-term solutions. So we must act today to ensure energy sustainability, self-sufficiency, reliability for the future. I really would prefer that all of us are on the same page in terms of educating the public. There are really no shortcuts. There may be band-aid solutions, but there really are no sustainable solutions that can be made overnight. The only things that can possibly be made in a short term are good policies. Not even overnight, but good policies. So that is what our for today and the months to come. We'll try to review and come up with policies that are that can help the way for a brighter energy future for our country. So I don't know how many of you do your work through the lens also of sustainability. So with me as I go through this, because I'm no longer chairman of that committee, but I will always approach my work with that in mind. So SDG 7 aims to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. So we are a signatory to the SDG, so that is a commitment that we have made. And the four characteristics are least cost possible, always an important issue for the Filipinos, reliable, that there is continuous provision of quality service, sustainable, able to meet the needs of the present without compromising the needs of the future generation, and then modern, no, that we're always open to new technology, new ways of addressing these concerns. Now, related to SDG 7 targets are target 7.1, by 2030, ensuring universal access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy service. 7.2, by 2030, increase substantially the share of renewable energy in the global energy mix. Target 7A, by 2030, enhancing international cooperation to facilitate access to clean energy research and technology, including renewable energy, energy efficiency, and advanced and cleaner fossil fuel technology, and promote investment in energy infrastructure and clean energy technology. Target 7.B, by 2030, expand infrastructure and upgrade technology for supplying modern and sustainable energy services for all in developing countries, in particular least developed countries, small island developing states, and landlocked developing countries in accordance with their respective programs of support. So most likely in a separate hearing, I would be inviting all of you to take a look at this target. Of course, that will start with DOE to ensure that we are also looking at this target as we try to prioritize what needs to be done. Now let's go to the bills in front of us. Our topic today is natural gas. No, we have bills on downstream, midstream. Do you have a separate one on upstream? We don't actually, but we're supposed to cover all. So my intention ideally is to just have one bill that covers all, and the draft committee report of the previous chairman seems to have covered all. So I'd just like you all to keep that in mind as you share your insight or even later on submit your position papers, that the objective is to cover everything, because it appears to me that it is already covered in the draft report that I have. So just for the record, according to the 2022 primary energy mix data of DOE, our energy sector is heavily reliant on oil and coal, with both sources accounting for 63.20% of the country's energy mix. I assume that's accurate, DOE? Yes? Okay. In this hearing, we aim to further explore natural gas as a possible transition fuel to renewable energy. That is also correct, DOE, that you look at natural gas as a transition fuel. Yes, okay. Natural gas as a transition fuel. Yes, okay. So this hearing aims to provide an overview of the natural gas in the country, including contribution of natural gas to the power grid, ongoing exploration projects, advantage and disadvantages of using natural gas, indigenous natural gas versus imported LNG, current laws and policies, gaps in our current practices, and the salient features of the bill. So with that note, hopefully I will talk less and you will all share your insights, your expertise. And the way we intend to go through the hearing is we will call on the different resource persons. Since I believe there are at least 2 more senators joining me, that's not a lot, then we will allow the senators to ask questions per resource persons. Normally when there's many, like in my other committee, Blue Ribbon, then I have to moderate it a little bit closer. But with this setup, I think we can have free-flowing questions and answers. Just a few administrative matters that you should know, since this is the first time I'm chairing this committee. You are always free to take a mobility break. You may stand, you may stretch, you may walk. You don't need my permission to go to the restroom. You don't need my permission to eat. Okay, those are all human needs, and you may do it. If it's just that you can feel free to ask the secretariat or my staff if you're going to be called on next, just so that you're here when needed. But I'm not strict about those things, and I hope you were all briefed that, well, you all have a glass of water. I do not serve any PET bottles here, and I suggest, because I'm sure we will see each other often in the months to come, please bring your reusable containers. I think that's it. Did I forget anything? Yeah, if I remember something, I will. Yeah, but yes. And I also request that you do not read your lengthy position papers to me. What is lengthy? 1 page, single space is already lengthy for me. Why? Because I can read, and I like to read late at night or in the night what's in your position papers. And many of you will have a presentation. I'm all fine with that. But if what you have prepared is a written position paper, then just highlight it. I may have seen it already if you submitted, but I don't want you to read the whole thing to me. Okay? Thank you, and we will proceed. So I will let you know who the first 3 speakers are, so you can prepare. First, I will hear from DOE, and then ERC, and then PNOC. Okay? So DOE, according to my staff, you have 10 minutes. I have had a briefing from DOE, FYI to all, so this is not the time for you to explain, and even if it was 3 hours. Oh, by the way, my deadline, so we can be mindful of the time, is not later than 4 o'clock for this hearing. So yes, DOE, you have 10 minutes, and then after DOE is ERC. Okay, who's making the presentation? Is it you, Secretary?
2 of us, sir.
The 2 of you.
Yes,
okay,
sir.
so feel free to share your time or do whatever you need to do. Thank you.
We have about 7 slides only, conscious of the time. Now we start with the first slide, the legal framework. Today, there's the rules and regulations and the governing the Philippine downstream natural gas industry. You can proceed to the next slide after the agenda there. Ay, maliit. Right. So with this framework, this is based on IPIRA and the EO that was issued, EO number 66, that mandated DOE to oversee or supervise the downstream industry of natural gas. The Bureau of Director Rino does the permitting for all the siting, construction, operation, maintenance, modification, and the whole cycle of the industry. Now, for accreditation, it also accredits suppliers, accredits importers, all the players in the industry. And they also cover the own use and when you sell also gas to generators. That's the role of DOE for today. And now, if you ERC on their part gives just the
Recording in
certificate
progress.
of compliance for them to be able to operate. That's the role of the DOE today. It basically gives the licenses and the permits for you to operate as a natural gas facility.
And we are pretty
ma'am.
much, sorry, just to
Yep.
related to the bill on hand, and we are pretty much adopting this, not at least this part that you've mentioned,
Yes, ma'am.
no, in the
We
bill, right?
we have recently
Yeah.
amended this so that we are more or less in line with the proposals in the Senate at that time. This was approved this year. This year lang, ma'am.
Okay.
We patterned it more or less
Okay.
on the changes that was proposed.
Okay.
Now, on the next slide, what is the role of natural gas? And my apologies for the slide that it's too small for some. Pero the plan of DOE or the mandate of the president is to have 35% our renewable energy by 2030 and 40% by 50% by 2040, and hopefully more than that in 2050. So we have run the numbers, and for a clean energy scenario, we need 106,568 megawatts of renewable energy, 106,568 megawatts additional from today up to 2050 for us to reach our goals. That's renewable, and there are issues in renewable also of the intermittence, and we need batteries, we need pump storage, but it cannot only be renewable. We need base load, and base load are the conventional ones, which is coal for today, coal, natural gas, and oil based. Coal, we have a moratorium, so it won't increase anymore, or just minimal increase. The only alternative to replace what should have been covered by coal would be natural gas. Otherwise, we have oil. So if we go for a clean energy scenario, we need 15,989 megawatts of gas-fired power plants or installed capacity. And there is a need for that. Our choice would be coal or natural gas as of today. So since natural gas is way cleaner, we are considering it as a transition fuel, because until we find the best solution for battery or for storage of renewable energy to address its intermittency, then we have a transition fuel, which is natural gas. Another option would be nuclear, but that's still baby steps.
We just
Yeah.
for the Secretariat to note and DOE, we can have another hearing also where you discuss renewables, what are the goals?
Yes, ma'am.
Not many people understand the storage issue. To be perfectly honest, it's something I only understood
Yes, ma'am.
when I became chairman and started studying the matter. I want people to understand this. So for the most for many of the Filipinos who clamor for renewable, they understand what are the limitations
ma'am.
and can support the direction of the administration on this. Okay, so
Yes,
we'll
ma'am.
do that. Okay.
Whenever
Yeah.
you want to schedule, yes, ma'am. Now, on the next page, again, this is even smaller, but on the green column, which is at the end of the table, this is the price of Malampaya, which is our natural gas here, the only natural gas that we have here. Malampaya ranges for this year from 11 to 12.8, the highest. There's a mga ano yan, mga more than 1 peso increase, no? More than one increase. US dollars only. There's $1 increase ang variance niya. Pero if you look at the blue column, this is LNG. It comes here liquid, no, and then there's a regasification. It can range from 11. Sometimes it could even be lower, but that's just really very ano lang, sporadic lang yan. 11 up to 18.75. It's very volatile. And it affects our electricity rates, especially like last year na there was a war in Ukraine. Then it increased up to 80, 70 to 80. Now there's adjustments again, but we are prone to whatever happens in the international community. And if we have problems with our suppliers, we will also have problems with bringing it into the Philippines. Malampaya is the most stable, and that is why we need more. Ngayon po, we are opening a bidding. We have a bidding for new fields to be explored. There are 5 fields that being explored, 3 in Bangsamoro, in the other not non-Bangsamoro areas. So we are trying to explore more. But this is why we recognize the importance of natural gas, especially indigenous. The investment for one regasification facility is around 1 billion. Today we have 2 regasification facilities to install a gas-fired power plant. The metrics is about 1.1 million per megawatt. So it's a huge investment to construct. You need about 2,000 people to construct a regasification facility, and to maintain a gas-fired power plant, 200 at every shift you will need. So there is substantial advantage to the government. And I wanted to emphasize that Malampaya has contributed from the start about 390 billion pesos to the national government. So if you import LNG, you don't get the contribution to the national government. You don't get the 390 billion. I'll leave it to Reno to explain what is the status now. What are the gas-fired power plants?
Okay, before you proceed, again, I will repeat some of the points that you made. Sometimes they're not clear to me, but in this case, they are clear. I am repeating it for the purpose of our listeners. Again, I like this to be educational for everyone, no? So you mentioned, and we do have a chart to show it, that the price fluctuation for the Malampaya gas is at most $1, no? From 11 point something, I think 11.5 to 12.8, $1 something. Compare this to imported. So let's be clear, no, we're talking imported. And I repeat the terms, and I'll repeat the phrases that even to me, I had to repeat it when I was learning about it. So because it is confusing. It is confusing to the average person. So when we talk about non-Malampaya gas, then all the other sources currently are imported, correct? Okay, they are imported. So these rates that you gave us, these are imported liquid natural gas. And for it to be available for use, they have to be regasified, which is why you mentioned regasification, 1 billion investment. So to be clear, when you talk about Malampaya gas, indigenous gas, there is no regasification process involved. So there is no added cost. There is no added investment. So if we look into the future, and we look at our direction of definitely using gas, natural gas as a transition fuel, then you have a choice between indigenous gas and the further explorations that Yusek Garin mentioned, or the importation. And so what you're saying is, with the importation, there is that investment for regasification, and that has been made. There are two But I read a slide somewhere that konti na lang yung capacity noon, so you still have to build more. Okay, later na yon. The point is there is an investment to be made if we will be as we are importing gas. With the indigenous gas of Malampaya, because this is delivered by pipe, which I actually had the opportunity to see and now understand better, there is no regasification process involved. So there is no need to spend that additional funding for regasification. But the other important point that you raised is that currently, at least in the chart you showed, which is just the current year, is already a price difference from $11.8 to 18.75. That's more than 50%. And because of the Ukraine war, you said that it even went up to $70 to $80. Okay, so in a nutshell, and without even knowing all the details, clearly, in terms of self-sufficiency, the advantage of having our own protects us because we are not the factors that affect the imported prices do not affect the indigenous gas, right? Yes, please.
Um, and I just wanted to add that for us to be cleaner, we need gas, no, not coal. We need this one.
Thank you for so in your earlier discussion, you mentioned that in our journey to fully transition to a more renewable energy dependent source, how do we get from where we are, which is coal intensive, coal and oil intensive, to more renewables? What is that transition plan? And that transition plan is natural gas. Correct? Okay. So dun tayo. And then the next question is, when you speak of natural gas, with what kind? Is it the imported, which I already went into the details, or is it investment in indigenous, or, and I'm sure somebody will discuss this later, the combination, diba? Okay, so clear. So now we go to Director Abad. Sana hindi kayo makatulog kasi for all of you here, you're all experts, but remember me and I think the audience, we are not experts. So we'll break this down so that we're sure everybody is familiar. Wait, this is ano lang, off the record na to. Quick survey. Who like me is the first time attending, not attending, but first time immersing in energy? Is it just me and my staff? Are all of you here experts? Wow, ang galing nyo. Pag nagtanong ako sa inyo, siguro doon nyo makasagot kayo, ha? Kasi walang umamin na katulad ko na I'm a freshman in this energy course. Walang umamin, okay? So be prepared. If I say the man in checkered shirt, please answer my question. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Director Abad.
Next slide. Madam Chair, the slide is about the current status of our regasification capacity vis-a-vis the gas demand from LNG. So we have to be clear that this is from LNG. So at this point in time, we have two possibly going to commercially operate this year, which is the Linseed Field Corporation Regas Terminal and the First Gen LNG Corporation Regas Terminal, both located in Batangas. So the current regasification capacity in total would be around 8.26 and 3 for Linseed at an equivalent of 1 MTPE to 1,000 megawatt of power. You would have around 8,260 megawatt in total for the current regasification capacity in terms of usage and conversion into power capacity. So around 8,260 megawatts of power. Now, the current demand for Linseed would be the 1,436.50. That's the existing installed capacity of Ilihan. And therefore, they still have around 50 capacity that is now reserved for the possibly going to commercially operate also 3 units of the EERI gas-fired power plant this year. So in total, they have now just a remaining of around for the San Miguel side would be around 213.50 megawatt of power converted capacity. And that's, in short, they need more. If they want to expand, they will have to adjust the regasification capacity. For first gen, they have just the current demand for existing power around 2,294.10, with a total regasification capacity equivalent to power capacity of around 5,260. They have a huge reserve for now of around 2,965.90 megawatt of power capacity for future power plants. Next slide. This is just the details of the so-called 3,730.50 megawatt. So we have five gas-fired power plants, both from first gen and SPPC. So SPPC would be just the Ilihan. The rest of the power plants are owned and operated by first gen. So the next slide. This is on the side of the monitoring of the gas terminals, the regas terminals. So first gen, as I've mentioned, and Linsid are about to commercially operate this year. But Energy World.
I'll just interrupt you,
Oh.
Director Abad, just to acknowledge the presence of Senator Alan Cayetano. Do you want to make a
Afternoon, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, at this point, the Department of Energy has already issued.
Sorry, can I ask all of you again, because I'm new, don't use initials with me like SSPC. I had to ask my staff ano yun because I don't memorize the yeah. Okay, alam ko na. Pero just a reminder, and I know it's natural for you because that's how you use it, but please bear with me and use the full term so that it's easier for me to follow. Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair. So to date, we have the Department of Energy has issued permit to construct to 4 projects, regasification terminal projects. First gen, as I mentioned, and Lynn said, we're going to probably commercially operate this year. But Energy World and the Luzon LNG terminal projects are still on the construction stage. Next slide, please.
Sorry, before you go into the details, I might forget my question, no? So when you discuss these ongoing projects, no, then this will go into one of my main questions, which I think DOE is the main source of the answer. Now, what is that energy mix, right? Because all of these construction of regasification facilities has to help, number one, the investors, want them to find themselves in a place that ay 100% tayo indigenous, sumobra na kayo. Then we'll have this battle. Very clear with your directions. I know for now we're short, so walang issue naman yon. And I think everybody agrees, tama ba, na we're looking at a combination. So, but that has to be very, very clear, okay? Because when I look at it, I'm like, okay, happy with all this, but this is only needed for imported. So what is that mix that we're looking at? You can answer it, you can save it for later. I just want you to know that's a question that needs to be answered, okay?
Yes, ma'am. We'll get the details. It's just that even with notice to proceed, notice to construct, and even the committed projects, we still have to review them to make sure that they proceed with the project, and then we can give you the definite answers. Kasi minsan kasi, out of this 4, yung unang slide kanina, yung dalawa dyan, hindi pa sure kung kailan sila mag-ooperate or So we just need to...
But actually, my question has nothing to do with the individual applicants. It's just really like, ano ba yung nakikita nating mix? And again, of course, that also determines what will we discover when we explore. So, my futures thinking training has shown me that we have to always have different scenarios. Our worst case scenario is there is only Malampaya. So with only Malampaya, ano yung kailangan pumasok, and you have already hindi na variable yung natural gas is the transition fuel. Hindi na variable yon. So ang variable na lang, what will be indigenous and what will be imported. And then the other variable is, ano hanggang saan ba, ano ba kakayanin indigenous? What is the best case scenario of indigenous? I mean, you have experts who can say the best case scenario is we find this much in, so that's not that difficult naman to, that's all I care about for this time. I don't care about the individual capacities of each one. You have to go ahead and proceed with that, but I just want to know, best case scenario, this is how much lang we will need na imported. Worst case scenario, then this is how much we need and how long will it take to prepare for the investments to come in. Syempre, there are some risks that we take, but I'm sure on both sides, these investors will want guarantees, right? So that's what I'm going to push you to provide. Thank you.
So,
Madam
next-
Chair, just because you sent an advanced question, may I just make a one manifestation or quick question to Meralco just to prepare for the questions later on? Yeah, with your permission, just 1 minute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I said earlier before you arrived, since I don't foresee there will be many senators, it's free-flowing. Ideally, to the person addressed reporting, but for that
Yes.
matter, you
Yeah.
can butt in anytime.
Yeah, just to the representative of Meralco, VP Valles, no? Sir, have you read the article of Mr. Tiglao yung July 15?
I'm not sure.
Sige, I'll give it to you. Mamaya pa naman, mahaba pa naman, so you can look at it and consult your people kasi may questions ako regarding that in relation to indigenous gas. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you for giving our resource person time to read it properly and give us an intelligent response. Kasi we know that sometimes you're put on the spot, so we prefer that they have time to look at it. Thank you for that. Secretariat, you'll take care of giving him a copy. Okay, let's proceed.
Okay. Madam Chair, on the next slide, please. These are the also ongoing
Recording in
projects.
progress.
Wala pa, ma'am. There are also ongoing projects, regasification terminal projects that are not on the construction stage but on the permitting and financial closing stage. So there are 3 more. Okay. And the next slide of that would be a discussion, the last slide would be the discussion on why we need the bill, because there are other features that we need to be incorporated. That cannot be done through a regulation alone. Okay.
Just to wrap up, Madam Chair, in addition to the current rules that we have that's been integrated in the current proposal, there's also additional features on the role of the different government agencies to include DNR, Marina, DOTR because of the logistics issues, even NCIP. And then ERC has to review also on the pricing because there will be pricing on the LNG and also on the indigenous. The issuance of the development plans and codes of standards to make sure that it's all safe and up to standards of the DOE and the international requirements. There's also a policy on gas aggregation in which we do recommend DOE that government should have at least a lead or a participation or any form of, not even to be a shareholder, but to be able to be on top of aggregation policies. Prioritization, reutilization of the indigenous natural gas. It gives us security, energy security, as well as we're not susceptible to the volatility of the international market. We also recommend fiscal incentives to encourage more investments, especially on indigenous gas, and the imposition of fines and penalties, which we cannot impose as a policy. That's all, Madam Chair.
For the record, the draft bill we're working on right now, working with, includes DOH. So
Alright. Sige,
just
ma'am.
add that. But basically, you're saying the features that you need, there are features that there are features in the bill that are needed because you cannot also provide for them
Yes,
legally, no? And the draft that you've seen at least already included?
Some are included, and we have submitted some more
Okay.
revisions. But
Okay.
we based it on the draft.
Have I seen those, the final revision? Di pa. Okay, sige. We'll take a look at that. Thank you. Okay, so we're done with DOE for now. But just a note, no, on fines and penalties, tama ba? Just a quick question for Attorney Di Malanta. Tama ba na for fines and penalties, there is much room for improvement to empower you further? Well, I think you're the next, no? Still a next, right? O, sasama nyo na yan sa discussion nyo. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to the honorable senators. We would like to manifest, Madam Chair, we submitted a presentation, but we noticed in the course of the DOE's presentation that some have been covered by the DOE presentation, so we won't repeat them anymore. Maybe we'll just focus on 2 slides out of the, I think, 11 that we submitted. If we can go to slide 3, which shares with everyone the current extent of the agency's regulation of natural gas facilities at the moment. There is no specific framework, hence the need for this law, for the regulation of natural gas facilities. Currently, they are lumped together with all other generation facilities that we regulate. So they come to us as either one, in the form of a supplier under a power supply agreement contracted by a distribution utility arising from a competitive selection process. So that's when we encounter them most of the time. The second, and this was already mentioned by Undersecretary Garin earlier, where before they operate, they need to get what is equivalent to a permit to operate, which is a certificate of compliance from us. This is when we test their compliance with certain standards, technical, financial, legal standards that the Commission had set. The third encounter we have with them is when there is a regular monitoring of that compliance, or worst case, when there are violations of their compliance with the grid code, which is like the technical code in relation to their connection to the grid, the reliability indices, which limits their outages in a year, the rules governing the spot market, because all plants have to offer their capacity to the spot market, and if there are violations of what we call market share limitations. These are competition rules that are set under the EPIRA. If there are those violations, then we encounter them for the 4th time in enforcement of these rules. And this is where we would first issue show cause orders so that they can explain the allegations of violation, and then if there is proved to be a violation, the imposition of fines and penalties. Here, Madam Chair, is where your question earlier on the fines and penalties, because the penalties were set back in 2001. They are really not commensurate anymore to the impact of certain violations. Aside from that, the agency, the ERC, has no authority to direct those fines and penalties imposed to address the damage that was suffered, for example, by a certain group of consumers arising from the violation. Medyo mag-off tangent ako, Madam Chair, but this is among the EPIRA amendments that we had proposed, the improvement on the fines and penalties, and the authority that the Commission be given the authority to direct the application of fines and penalties to the consumers that were directly suffered the damage for those violations. Right now, all the collections of the agency is remitted to the National Treasury. So none is applied to for example, the outages that were suffered.
Since you mentioned EPIRA,
Apo.
are the 2 agencies, DOE and ERC, prepared to have a hearing on? You're prepared already? So I was asking my staff to help me recall what was the discussion I had with Secretary Lotille. So, I mean,
Yes,
in
ma'am.
terms of
We
putting it on the agenda soon,
yes,
sooner than later.
our priority is the reorganization or strengthening of ERC and under IPIRA.
Okay, yeah, because that's what she was saying, that it's the ERC portion within the IPIRA which is the most important. Yeah, okay. I just wanted to be sure we're all on the same page. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The other slide that I wanted to share with the committee is focusing on the first bullet earlier on the power supply agreements. This is where we exercise authority at the moment. The natural gas cost is part of the generation cost that we approve. So directly, we do not under the current regulations, directly we do not approve the price of natural gas. But since it is part of the generation cost, we review and approve it as part of the generation cost that's passed on to the consumers. Specifically, the charges for generation form part of what we call retail rate, which under EPIRA must be reviewed and approved by the ERC. There is no distinction at the moment whether it's Malampaya or imported LNG, because it all forms part of fuel cost. That's it, Madam Chair. The rest were covered by the DOE presentation.
I do have a question for you. Hold on. Let's proceed, no? I will probably come back to you because I think the issue I want to discuss will surface anyway in the discussion. So I'll just get back to you. I think the next is PNOC, no? And then let me just let you know who else will be called on after so you can prepare. Ah, there. Okay, so we'll call on PNOC, and then after that, please be ready, Meralco, and then First Gen. So PNOC first, Attorney Buenviaje?
Good afternoon,
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Good afternoon.
PNOC, we did no longer prepare any presentation because when we coordinated with the Department of Energy yesterday, all the topics are already covered. However, we would like to assure this committee that the PNOC, as the implementing arm of the Department of Energy, we are here to fill in whatever gaps that the private sector will leave in this sector, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So we are ready to go to Meralco. Attorney do I say Valles? Valles, okay, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we would like to thank the Committee on Energy for inviting Meralco to today's hearing and allowing us to express our views on the Senate bill. Meralco was assigned to discuss the current industry practice and gaps in natural gas policy. So on the current industry practice, we will briefly talk about the competitive selection process, or the CSPs, for the power supply agreements. While on the policy gaps, we have identified the role of natural gas in clean energy transition and alignment or harmonization with the PIRA's LISCO sourcing obligation. And finally, with the indulgence of the committee, we would like to present our policy recommendations taking off from the discussions of the TWG during its meetings in March and April this year. So next slide, please. So first, on the current industry practice, we all know that the distribution utilities comply with the PIRA's LISCO sourcing obligation through the conduct of the competitive selection process, or the CSPs. Under existing guidelines by the Department of Energy and the ERC, the CSPs for power supply agreements must promote fair competition by providing equal opportunity to all eligible and qualified suppliers, and must award the PSAs, or the power supply agreements, to power suppliers with the lowest bid offer. Now, both these characteristics are aligned with the LISCO sourcing requirement under the PIRA. Next slide. The CSP should allow participation of all eligible and qualified suppliers and award PSA to the bidder with the lowest bid offer. That is also observed in CSPs for renewable energy and indigenous natural gas. Under the Department of Energy's RPS rules, CSPs for RPS compliance should not be limited to a specific type of renewable energy, like solar or wind only, but should be open to all eligible and qualified RE technologies. In the Department of Energy's October 11, 2023 advisory on the conduct of CSP for power supply using indigenous natural gas, distribution utilities must still ensure that while CSP encourages participation of indigenous natural gas, the CSP is consistent with the obligation to supply captive customers in a least cost manner. Meralco's power supply sourcing is guided by PIRA and related regulations issued by the Department of Energy and the Energy Regulatory Commission. Meralco CSPs were issued COCs, or the Certificate of Compliance by Certificate of Conformity by the Department of Energy, which certify that the supply requirement scheduled for CSP is in accordance with the latest DOE-approved power supply procurement plan. So for example, in the CSP that Meralco conducted earlier this year for 1,200 megawatt baseload supply, the DOE, in its issuance of the COC, found that the terms of reference for the bidding was consistent with its advisory on CSPs for indigenous natural gas. By including the provisions required under the DOE advisory, Meralco was hopeful that the DOE's advisory will align with its least cost sourcing obligation under the IPIRA and its franchise, as we expected that the bid offer of the power supplier with indigenous natural gas would be cheaper than the bid offer of power supplier using imported LNG. However, this was not the case, as shown on the screen, based on the bid offer submitted in the 1,200 megawatt baseload CSP. Instead, the bid offer of the power supplier using LNG turned out to be lower than the bid offer of the power supplier using indigenous natural gas. The LCOE, or the levelized cost of electricity rate, which is an all-in rate inclusive of VAT and line rental cap of the bidder using indigenous natural gas, was 1 peso and 38 centavos more expensive than the rate of the bidder using the imported LNG. If the PSA was still awarded to the bidder using indigenous natural gas, then Meralco consumers would be paying at least an additional 2.4 billion pesos per year over a period of 15 years. So clearly, this goes against our least cost mandate. In compliance with the PIRA's requirement to source supply in the least cost manner, the PSA was awarded to the bidder with the lowest bid offer. The ERC acknowledged compliance of Meralco's bidding process with existing regulations and issued provisional approval to implement the power supply agreement. So admittedly, based on May 2 to 2024 version of the draft bill that the TWG has worked on, a lot of details concerning the proposed policies for natural gas need to be refined. While it has been mentioned that details can be addressed in the IRR, there should be some clarity and common understanding on how the proposed policies will affect existing mechanisms, particularly those that relate to the DU sourcing obligations. So in the next slide, for example, there was a proposal to prioritize the use of indigenous natural gas over imported natural gas. Given the results of our 1,200 megawatt baseload CSP, will the proposed policy exempt indigenous natural gas from competitive selection process or the bidding, or will the CSPs or the bidding specific for power suppliers using indigenous natural gas only be allowed? If that is the case, then there will only be one participant in the CSP. In addition, how will the proposed policy ensure that there is fair competition, given that Malampaya is currently the only source of indigenous natural gas, and only first-gen and Ilihan power plants have existing pipelines for physical access to Malampaya gas? There was also a proposal to prioritize dispatch of power plants that use indigenous natural gas. How will this policy affect prices in the West and where plants bid based on their short-run marginal costs, and plants with lower short-run marginal costs are dispatched before plants with higher marginal costs? A plant using indigenous natural gas may have higher short-run marginal costs compared to other fuels like coal, and even a plant using imported LNG. Lastly, in the next slide, there was also a proposal to promote gas aggregation as a nationwide or grid-wide strategy. However, it was not clarified during the TWG meetings if this policy will indeed be mandatory and how this policy will be implemented, especially for those without physical access to indigenous natural gas. The proposal may result in higher electricity prices, especially if indigenous natural gas turns out to be more expensive than imported LNG. The policy may also lead to impairment of contract obligations if abrogation will be mandatory even for DUs that have already sufficiently contracted power supply agreements for their captive market, especially pursuant to the Department of Energy approved PSPP. So for power plants, there may be stranded fuel volume if they already fully contracted their fuel supply to serve their offtake agreements. Furthermore, similar to the proposed policy on priority sourcing, how will the aggregation ensure that there is fair competition since there is currently one source of indigenous natural gas? To avoid conflicting policies, Meralco respectfully recommends that the underlying objective of the proposed bill should still be to ensure that Filipinos pay for the lowest cost among all natural gas supply options. Let domestic gas compete with imported LNG, because if the cost of indigenous natural gas is lower than LNG, then indigenous natural gas will automatically be prioritized over LNG. And this is consistent with the PIRA's least cost sourcing requirement. If indigenous gas is more expensive and a policy to provide a market for domestic gas will still be adopted, then instead of priority sourcing, priority dispatch, and mandatory blending or aggregation, the committee may wish to consider establishing a minimum percentage of electricity generation from natural gas per grid, something similar to RPS or the Renewable Portfolio Standard under the Renewable Energy Act, where mandated participants like DUs will also be identified. However, a mechanism should be put in place to improve competitiveness of the industry, given that Malampaya will still have monopoly until new gas fields become operational. Lastly, DUs will continue to conduct CSPs to provide reliable electricity supply to its captive customers. To avoid impairment of contract obligations, the required minimum percentage of generation from natural gas should be applied prospectively, and there should be mechanisms for its compliance. That's it, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Attorney Valles. Let me just check with the staff of Senator Alan because he reserved for to ask you questions, no? So let me just check because he stepped out. I actually have some questions, but I don't want us to have to ask repetitive questions, and Senator Allen would rather ask after everyone speaks, so I will also hold my questions for now. The next is First Gen. Mr. Mark Miranda.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon.
We don't have a presentation, but we just have a brief statement that we'd like to read, respectful of everybody's time, on the 4 pending bills. If I
As long
may,
as it's brief.
it's brief.
Yeah,
very
because
brief.
actually Attorney Valles violated my rule of no reading, but I allowed it because it's very technical and I don't also know how you would summarize that simpler. So it was okay with me that you read. So kung ganun din yung sayo, okay din sa akin. If it's just policy statements, just tell me the policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First Gen Corporation and its subsidiaries engaged in power and LNG would like to thank the Honorable Committee for inviting us to participate in this legislative proceeding. Okay. In past attempts to regulate or build a framework for the natural gas industry, be they through legislation or administrative issuances, certain topics have emerged as quote-unquote contentious and elicited much discussion. These topics are the scope, whether the measures would cover midstream, downstream, or both, and the definitions of these terms. Another is the franchise requirement, whether certain sectors of the value chain, particularly transmission and distribution, are public utilities or not. A third issue is rates or tariffs or fees, whether they should be regulated or not. The fourth is third-party access, and the fifth is incentives. It appears that the 4 Senate bills at present are no different from these previous attempts. Almost all of these 5 points are sources of disharmony among these bills. Senator Gatchalian's and Senator Villanueva's bills cover midstream segment, while those of Senator Marcos and Senator Tulfo cover downstream. 3 of the bills consider transmission as a public utility and therefore requires legislative franchise, while 1 does not. Thus, the same 3 mandate that transmission rates be regulated, while the other 1 does not. Third-party access in Senator Gatchalian's and Senator Villanueva's bills is required upon a declaration of unutilized capacity by the DOE and ERC. In Senator Tulfo's bill, PPA is voluntary and left entirely to the discretion of the operator. Senator Marcos's bill tries to establish a middle ground by making PPA obligatory only upon a determination by the operator of available and uncommitted excess capacity subject to review by the DOE and subject to a so-called infrastructure development period. On the area of incentives, though, the 4 bills seem to be in agreement that the NatGas projects much as they are risky investments for proponents as they are beneficial to the entire country, only deserve the incentives given under the investment priorities plan and the CREATE law and no more. In our view, these are just some of the provisions that need to be harmonized if a law is to be passed that properly regulates, protects, supports, and promotes the fledgling Philippine natural gas industry. That's it.
Thank you. Most of what you have mentioned, Mr. Miranda, I have the answer to. As to whether everyone will be happy, I don't know. I doubt.
Yeah.
But we do have the answer, so at least it's not a question mark. But I would like to have a copy of your statement so that we can make sure that we have that answer. And you are all welcome to propose your answer to those questions. So you are all welcome to give your preferred response, especially when you point out that there are very different treatments in the different bills. By all means, we would like to hear and, if possible, but I know it's impossible to accommodate everyone as there may be different interests, but we would like to hear everyone. So at this point, we're already at the point where you tell us ano yung version doon na gusto nyo. Okay? So submit your existing position paper, and then as soon as you're ready, send us your answers to your own questions. Thank you. So the next speaker is from Prime Energy, and then please be ready. We only have two more after that. Philippine Independent Power Producers Association and Center for Energy Ecology and Development. Please note that again, this is a continuing process. So other concerned parties have been heard in previous hearings and TWGs. That's why my team, the Secretariat, decided to just focus on these key resource persons. So I'll give the floor now to Prime Energy. Ms. Donna Cruz, you have the floor. Do you want to move?
Hi, Madam Chair. Based on the discussions made so far, there are a few more pieces of info I
Sure.
wish to share, but I couldn't email it, unfortunately. So is it okay to just spend 2 seconds to just connect my
Yeah,
computer?
of course. So will it take more than 2 seconds? Because I can call on someone else, or 2 seconds lang talaga? Okay, no, we can make good use of our time by acknowledging Senator Sherwin, who has been very busy attending to another concern that, yeah, I'm not there yet. I'm about to get there, because he's very much involved in other issues that we are also tackling. The issue of falsification of birth certificates. We've taken that up in the Blue Ribbon Committee. This does not involve the Energy Committee, but I'm giving time to Ms. Donna to set her PowerPoint up. And yes, as Senator Allen said, of course, Senator Sherwin is the former chairperson of this committee. Sherwin, did you want to make a statement? No more? Just listen? Okay. On a sidebar, the three of us are also, well, I was a member of the EDCOM. So these two gentlemen are still very busy because we were abandoned by our other co-chair, Senator Angara, who is now the DepEd Secretary. We'll suspend for a minute.
Hopefully worth the time.
Okay, we're ready when you are.
Okay. May I see the presentation on screen? Okay. I will not repeat the messages already mentioned earlier by the DOE and ERC, Madam Chair and Senators. So I'll just skip straight to next slide, please. I think 3 slides, hence. One more. Okay, please continue. Okay. Yusek Sharon earlier mentioned that the price of indigenous gas tends to be very stable. So despite market shocks and disruptions in the supply chain, even typhoons, you name it, the price of indigenous gas or Malampaya gas in this particular case remains stable. So that's if you see there, the shaded area, the top of that shaded area is the price of Malampaya gas, whereas the price of other fuels that we use here in the country, like coal, LNG, diesel, etc., tends to move along with the market. So I just like to support that point from the DOE, and that's the reason why, by the way, this is a trend from 2015 onwards. So it's really the last 10 years, it's demonstrated that kind of resilience against the market. So it really is something that we must continue to have to stabilize electricity costs. The other point I'd like to mention is that the revenue, so Malampaya gas, in the price of Malampaya gas, there is included there the government revenue. So there is, for every peso of net revenue from Malampaya gas, we remit revenue to the government, to 60% of revenue to the government, really. So whereas the other fuel sources won't have that kind of revenue remittances to the government. So truly, the true value or cost of Malampaya gas is in fact even lower than the number you see there, because we do return the revenue to the government for development projects, for energy and any other use.
Sorry, what
Move
is
on.
that red dotted line that has the biggest spike?
So that's price of LNG spot cargoes. So when we buy at JKM spot prices, this is the kind of LNG that we import in the country at the moment. That's its movement. So during the Ukraine war, you see there the big spike. That was the number mentioned by Derek Rino and Yusek Sharon earlier, when it was between $50 to $80 per MBTU, whereas indigenous gas cost was just about $10 per million British thermal units.
Okay.
Yeah. Even coal actually moved up. You see the green line there, that's coal.
The green is coal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on. So clearly,
So I'm just curious, sorry, can you go back to that slide? So if you were also to further deduct the amount paid to government, what is that? What would the line look like?
it will be lower than coal.
Even lower than
Yeah.
the gray, even lower than the
Lower than
current.
the green.
Obviously, no, I mean, obviously lower than the line that you have indicated for
Yeah.
indigenous gas, because
Yeah.
mamaminus pa siya.
Maminusan po ng mga 40 to 60%. You take out 40 to 60% of that
Okay.
line. That's the true cost of Malampaya.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the message there. Let's move on. Next slide. Now, clearly, there is no contest, nothing more to be said. Indigenous gas is truly something that we must continue to have, extend its life as much as we can, develop all of our indigenous gas resources. But what I'd like to highlight here is that the Philippines, over the last 10 to 20 years, hasn't done a really good job of exploring and developing our indigenous resources. You can see there on the chart on the left, sorry, maliit na siya. But on the chart on the left is the amount of discovered resources in the various countries in Southeast Asia. So the one with the biggest bar there, I believe, is Malaysia, then Indonesia, and then I think, sorry, I couldn't see it, but really the Philippines is the one rightmost. Okay, barely anything discovered, and that's simply because we haven't been exploring. The more you drill wells the more we drill wells, the more is the chance of success in discovering a new Malampaya hub. And you can see on the chart naman on the right, during the time of President Marcos Sr., you see there in the 1970s and 1980s, we've had quite a lot of exploration activity that in fact led to the discovery of the Malampaya field. So really, it's a game of probability here. The more you drill, the more you have the chance of indigenous gas discovery or even oil. But we haven't had that new discovery over the last 20 years simply because we haven't drilled. So now, with the renewal of the Service Contract 38, really pushed by the DOE and signed by President Marcos Jr., we now have a chance to reverse this trend. And I can talk about what we're doing there in Prime Energy and the SC38, Service Contract 38 Consortium, to try and reverse that trend. Please move on. Okay. Now, so this is really the result. The result of us not having had much exploration and development activity in the last 10 years has led to us becoming even more independent on imported gas. So here, I've only shown here the graph for gas sources in the country. So you see there the blue area there is the amount of Malampaya gas we still have remaining and to be produced in our existing wells. And then we are really intending to drill two new wells next year to produce new gas in 2026. That's the orange area that you see over there. So 2026, hopefully we get that new gas. And then if we continue to look at other prospects in offshore, we might in fact discover more prospects. So these are more like estimates for us, the yellow areas there, and even the white area there could be, I mean, if we have a new discovery, it could be anything. The amount of gas could be anything. But if we focus on today, really, the installed gas-fired power capacity we have is the top bar over there, installed or to be installed, installed capacity, including the second Ilihan power plant, is the top sort of blue line over there. So for us to meet the gas demand of the existing power plants that use gas at the moment, we do need to import LNG. We really have no choice. That's 70% now, and indigenous gas is only about 30% of the current gas-fired mix. But the issue with this, and this is what the DOE also mentioned earlier, Sec Sharon, is that there is a cost to this. Yeah. And you can see there's a table there. We simulated what the additional cost of power would be if we were to import or use 100% LNG. And that's about, I think, between 1 to 2 pesos per kilowatt hour additional we'll have to pay if we're 100% using imported LNG for gas-fired power. Okay. Next slide, please. We also studied then what could be a scenario for if we continue to import LNG and build additional LNG capacity, what could happen? So we looked at other countries and what their energy journey has been, and one example is Pakistan. So Pakistan in 2015 had they used to have their own indigenous gas resource. They allowed it to deplete sometime in 2015 because they said, okay, we can just buy imported LNG. So that became their energy policy. They just purely imported LNG. But then when the Ukraine war happened, they only had one long-term LNG contract. They were just canceled right then and there because countries in Europe could pay more for the gas and at higher volumes. So whoever they had a contract with, Pakistan, just said, sorry, we'll just go to the better buyer. And Pakistan to this day continues to have an energy crisis. Yeah. This one is an example in Singapore. So Singapore, they don't have their own indigenous gas resource, but they use piped, so they get indigenous gas from another country. I think it's either Indonesia or Malaysia. They pipe it in, but and then the rest of their gas requirements, they use LNG. But at some point, I think sometime in 2022, when there was also the Ukraine war and there was a fight for gas resources, their piped supply of gas had to be cut. So then Singapore LNG importers, because at that point in time, they were very comfortable. They were comfortable, okay, we'll just import LNG because there's enough and we have piped gas. But because they haven't really locked themselves into better contracts on LNG and to get indigenous gas resources, they ended up having a price spike also. So now the Singapore government is setting out policies to ensure that they would end up kind of managing their pool of LNG resources and piped gas. And we could be exposed to this same kind of vulnerability. Move on. So we recognize this. So the Service Contract 38 consortium is really keen on developing our indigenous gas resources. So we put in the best team, the best talents to try and drill next year, and we've been able to do that despite the challenges of doing that. We are prepared to invest about $800 million, $800 to $859 million for drilling the 2 wells. But we experience quite a lot of challenge here, I must say, because first of all, there's a pending case with the ERC where the sales from our gas is not yet fully paid. So we're waiting for the resolution of that, and we need that the full gas sales really for us to fund our exploration program, a drilling program next year. And the second challenge that we face, really a headwind, is that the current buyers of our gas haven't so far won any contract for long-term supply of power to the market. So there is some uncertainty for us there, and that's where we need really the support of the government. Okay, please move on. So we really believe that the nat gas bill would help us set the foundations for energy security. To us, we really do need, for us to meet the Philippine Energy Plan, we do need to import LNG, but what we are advocating is that we predicate that with a very reliable domestic gas source, because without that, we will be fully dependent, and we know what the risk will be, fully dependent on imported LNG. And for that to happen, we must, we are advocating really for securing a market for indigenous gas, prioritize the use of indigenous gas over imported LNG, prioritize the contracting of power generated from indigenous gas in various upcoming contracting of power, and really prioritize also the dispatch of gas of power produced from indigenous gas. And other provisions also in the bill are there that we are very appreciative of. And last but not least, LNG infrastructure we do need, but to need it put it in a way that it still stabilizes and leads to affordable energy costs. Maybe, if I may be allowed, Madam Chair, there was a point made earlier on in the presentation of Meralco, saying that in the bid for the last CSP, the indigenous gas cost was higher than the LNG gas cost in the bid. I just like to make a slight correction there that the bidded fuel cost at the time was not pure indigenous gas. It was a mix of LNG and indigenous gas. Yeah, and the reason for the higher price at that time was because there are other costs to LNG that were included in that price, as I understand. As you well know earlier from Yusek Sharon's presentation, the price of indigenous gas is all in. What you get from the invoice is all in, everything, no regas, no liquefaction, that's it. But with LNG costs, there is regasification cost. The power generators also have to put in some costs for the investment in the terminal, et cetera, et cetera. So there are other things like this that are included in the price that I believe leads to that higher cost. Now, one thing I'd like to make a point here very, very clearly is that at the moment, our experience is in these the terms of reference for these CSPs, the price of Malampaya gas is not really compared apples to apples to the price of LNG as it's set out in the CSP. And I think Chair Mona mentioned that earlier. This is probably one area where we could make some improvements, because as you've noted very, very sharply earlier, Senator Pia, the cost of Malampaya, you can't compare with LNG because it's all in, plus it has government revenue imputed to it.
Madam Chair, can I clarify that? Can you put that on that slide? I think it was the second or third from the last nung sa Meralco.
Yeah.
That's the 2023. Because you're talking about it just so that you keep using apples to apples. So can we see the apple?
Okay.
para
I think
lang mas
it's
malinaw
one
for
of the
us.
backup slides, ma'am.
Yeah, I think it was like second or third to the last slide ng Meralco. So basically, you're saying na deceptive to, not in the I'm not saying that someone's trying to deceive, but under the rules, hindi apples to apples, so mas mahal yung lumalabas na mas mura. Sa
I think
ano,
it's
sa
the-
presentation ng Meralco mismo.
Ah,
Yung second or third to the last slide nila. Just so that hindi tayo theoretical, di ba? Punta na tayo dun talaga sa actual. Sige, next. Yung may prices, yung 2023 bid nila. That one. So, is this, Miss Donald, what you're talking about, for example? So, for example, alin dyan yung all-in? Yung 8.3.
No, it's not there.
Why is it
Senator
not there?
Alan. That price there is a mix of LNG and indigenous gas.
Ba't walang indigenous lang dyan?
Hindi lang indigenous gas po. Opo.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Pero may nag-bid ba dyan na all indigenous? Wala.
Wala.
Bakit wala?
We don't have enough indigenous gas po talaga. So as far as I understand, that contract was for 15
Yeah.
years.
So that's
Yeah.
what I wanted to bring
Mm.
out, yung sinabi ni Mr. Valles na what if mas mura, mas mahal, etc.
Yeah.
Realistically, with only Malampaya now, you will always ang layo sa kailangan ng ating bansa compared sa imported din.
Yeah.
Diba? I mean, if we had 10 Malampayas or 20, I don't know the computation.
Yeah.
Then yung fears mo kanina na sinasabi mong, sir, na paano kung mas mataas, paano kung mas mababa. Kasi panay theoretical yung nasabi mo kanina. But one, even the DOE said mas mura ang indigenous. Two, the amount of indigenous is is so much less than what we need, no? Oh. So saan naman dyan ang pure ano lang, walang halo? It's pure imported.
I sent, kanina po may pinadala po ako na presentation with that backup, ma'am.
Yeah. On
Were you
this,
able
is
to
South
receive?
Premier or sino nanalo dito theoretically?
May I?
Yes,
may I,
yes, please, sir. Sa'yo.
Mr. Chair, the one that won the bidding for this one is South Premier Power Corporation
Okay.
with the lowest bid.
And that
and it is pure LNG.
6.7 landed cost yan or
That's a delivered, yes, delivered headline rate.
so yung pag-regasify niyan kasama pa hindi na?
Yes, all in po.
All in na yan.
Yes.
All in. So
Yes.
cheaper apples to apples.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
The TOR explicitly requires.
Sige, I
the
just
co-
wanted to clarify that. Thank you, Madam Chair. Sige, we'll go back to it later. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to see on that.
Are you wrapping up or that's your last, I think?
This was the last slide. If there are questions on yung ano po, comparing yung apples to oranges comparison, we do have that. Hindi lang po nag-show dyan.
Sige, I'll go to that later.
Yeah.
Himayin
Sige.
natin mamaya.
Sige. Okay. I also have
Hindi po.
resource persons. Philippine Independent Power Producers Association, represented by Attorney Ann Estorco Montelibano. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Senator Cayetano and Senator Gatchalian. PIPA relies on the spirit of volunteerism for our members, so we are currently refining all the comments that we have submitted and discussed during the past technical working groups, but we will submit this to the chair as soon as it is approved by the board. However, I do want to take this opportunity to highlight a few priority concepts of PIPA. So just to give you a brief background, Madam Chair, since this is, I think, the first time that we are meeting, PIPA is composed of the generators. We have 27 member generators. Most of them are 50 megawatts and above. So we have all our members have an installed capacity collectively of around 25,000 megawatts. So that's the reason why you can see PIPA in forums and discussions, because we actively participate in regulation, determination, and policy making. So just also like an energy 101. So we have 4 sectors in the energy industry. We have your generation, your transmission, your distribution, and your retail. Now, the transmission sector and the distribution sector are natural monopolies. So therefore, they are regulated. However, when it comes to us, the generation sector, and then of course the other one, the retail, we are a competitive sector, meaning we are deregulated. We let market forces play as much as possible, right? Of course, in keeping with the policy of law and regulation as determined by Congress and our regulators, okay? So, on today's topic, we have 3 things that we want to highlight in the bills that were discussed. First is that we just want to ensure that there is a transparent and non-discriminatory access to Malampaya natural gas supply, which means the indigenous source. So all interested generation facilities or GenCos, okay, or LNG, not gas GenCos, shall have equal access, shall be afforded equal access to this supply, and will be able to share in the benefits of a conceptually lower cost because it is an indigenous source, right? Number 2, gas aggregation should not be mandatory, okay? And it should not be limited to one party. And the third, but last,
Sorry,
yes,
can you
ma'am.
repeat the second? I was talking to my staff.
It's okay, ma'am. Gas aggregation, I think it was discussed also by Meralco. It should not be mandatory, okay? And it should not be limited to one party. So, and this is also in the spirit of competitiveness. And lastly, ma'am, we believe that there should be no priority dispatch of any electricity, okay, produced by gas-fired power plants that utilize any kind of natural gas. The energy is supposed to be technology and fuel agnostic. So in the spirit of competition, and ERC would agree with me on this because this is their guiding force. It is the least cost and competitiveness that drives them approving all our contracts. So in the mandate, in compliance with the mandate of EPIRA, if you are to be guided by least cost, then obviously competitiveness should always be the guiding principle in the bill. So that in closing, Madam Chair, we just want to emphasize competition and least cost should be the framework. Okay, of since this has been echoed by the EPIRA since 2001. So fuel costs, as stated by the ERC, they are, yes, of course, the largest components in the generation rate. So it is important for us generators to procure our fuel in the least cost possible to maintain our competitiveness. Otherwise, with if we don't do so, if we're not able to do so, then this totally affects energy security, reliability, and affordability. That's it, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Just a quick question, no?
Yes, ma'am.
When you said competition and least cost should be the main factors, you're referring to the entire energy source or just natural gas? Because coal could be cheaper but not cleaner. So I just want to be clear about your position.
Yes, ma'am. PIPA is energy agnostic. So basically, since we would like, our priority is to ensure that we have affordable first and reliable and secure energy. For the rest, I mean, it's more of the planning, so we don't suffer from brownouts or blackouts or any instability. So at the moment, while we get our, I mean, so to speak, ducks in a row in terms of long-term planning, we believe we should be technology agnostic and fuel agnostic as well. Whatever gets us to the security and the least cost for a consumer should be the priority. So we have our competitive selection process, the CSP, which ensures competition,
Okay,
ma'am.
understand. So in other words, you do not subscribe to the Sustainable Development Goals.
Oh, we do, ma'am, but we
But
believe that should be
requires a
balanced.
transition, that requires, so I just wanted to be clear kasi
Yes, ma'am.
you will always be invited, so I will not have to ask you this question repeatedly.
Yes,
Do you
ma'am.
subscribe or not subscribe?
We do subscribe, ma'am, but however, in terms of energy security, we believe that we will have to work together with the DOE and the ERC to ensure that our generators will participate in ensuring we have secure energy. But in terms of sustainability, ma'am, obviously, yes.
Yes,
we believe
but
in
your answer is not
It's-
consistent with that statement.
Yes,
Kasi
ma'am,
you
but-
said you're agnostic, therefore it doesn't matter. I just want to understand. So you will not include the component of harm to the environment or public health in your mix?
Oh, no, ma'am. We always include harm to the environment and all of those things in our mix because our generators actually comply with energy with the DENR and all of the new policies. So the technology that is even being used by, let's say,
Yes,
our coal.
okay. No,
Yeah,
I
so
don't
we do.
question
Yeah,
compliance. No, I don't question your compliance, but you will always
we take it.
you will
Yes, ma'am.
always choose a cheaper source for as long as regardless if there are alternatives if they are even a bit more expensive. That is the question.
Ma'am, that depends on the Energy Regulatory Commission because we just bid. We take our prices into consideration when we do our bid for the CSP, ma'am.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe I can see your complete profile na lang because
Yes,
I don't
ma'am.
want to use up the time on that, but I just need to know who I'm dealing with when I discuss with all of
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, ma'am.
So our next last resource person for today is the Center for Energy Ecology and Development, Attorney Tisha Soresca. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you so much, Madam Chair. We are really grateful for this opportunity to talk about the environmental impacts of liquefied natural gas. As we are happy that was highlighted in the previous discussion, of course, what's treated as cheaper won't always be the most sustainable and won't always be in the best interest of the consumers, especially of the Filipino people. If we could go to my presentation, please. If you could kindly flash it on screen. I'll go through it as quickly as I can. All right, so to get us started, we would like to put in context just how much, and I know there was already a presentation on how many there are now, but we're also looking at the proposed projects for LNG power plants and import terminals. So we have 39 in the pipeline, equivalent to around 42.6 gigawatts, and 7 LNG import terminals, totaling around 28.06 MPTA. Given, of course, that it's already been highlighted that LNG won't have as much carbon emissions as coal, we would also like to highlight that actually it's the main source of methane emissions. And according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in a 10 to 20 year time scale, methane is just as harmful to the climate as carbon dioxide. This is considering that methane actually stores 80 times more heat than carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Also taking into consideration that, as we all know, the Philippines is among the most disaster risk vulnerable country in the world. According to the World Risk Index, we are among the top global disaster risk hotspots, and we continue to suffer from multiple extreme weather events, including intensifying typhoons, sea level rise, global warming, loss of biodiversity, infrastructure, and of course, loss of lives. Just to make a point here, we have the case of Typhoon Ondoy, which more than a decade back killed as much as 464 people, 529 injured, and as we all know, there have been increasing occurrences of super typhoons in the country, not just in Metro Manila, but all over, especially in the provinces. Highlighting specifically the province of Batangas, where you will see that 9 out of the 39 proposed plants, sorry, next slide, 9 out of 39 proposed plants and 4 out of the 7 proposed LNG terminals will be located. Batangas also is facing the Verde Island Passage, which is a hotspot of LNG expansion, but internationally it's also dubbed as the Amazon of the oceans, one of the richest and most productive and biodiverse marine areas in the world, and there are thousands of fish species, hundreds of coral species, and thousands of others that are at risk with the development of LNG projects in the area. As also correctly pointed out earlier, while we become dependent on importation, that will also result in greater traffic of tankers and ships carrying oil, coal, and other fossil fuels into the area, specifically the Verde Island Passage. Among the negative impacts on biodiversity this will have is that it will add more pressure to the Verde Island Passage, which is again one of the most biodiverse marine places in the region, and again is called the Amazon of the oceans. According to a study by our institution, an addition of 387 tankers will be passing through the Verde Island Passage annually once gas projects are fully developed because of the increased demand in LNG. This will put the area at risk for more oil spills, gas spills, and given that numerous tankers will have to dock near the plant and provide supplies of oil and LNG. Among the damages we are anticipating on the Verde Island Passage would be, of course, damage to corals and mangroves, degradation of the waters, reduced number and species of fish, and ship strikes and reef strikes. I would like to highlight at this specific point that we do have accounts from fisherfolk and fisherfolk communities of just how much less they're able to catch fish now. They're barely able to make a living from the current impact because of the lower quality of water. You'll see in the next slide that we've been observing the test results, the water quality in the area, and there is a continuing trend of increase in phosphate, total suspended solids, chromium, total copper, lead, and mercury in the area where some of the gas projects are being proposed and where the gas projects will eventually stand. So this is in the areas of Lobo, De La Paz, Ilihan, and Ilihan. The trend is continuously on the rise, so we're anticipating that as the water quality suffers because of the developments there, of course the livelihood and the biodiversity there will also suffer. Let's go to the next slide. This similarly reflects the suffering or the decreasing quality of water in the area in Batangas. And next, we're highlighting the pollution from the tankers specifically, which will result in heavy metals from routine maintenance, introduction of invasive species, disposal of dirty ballast water and bilge water, noise pollution and illegal dumping of chemical waste, air pollution from emissions of tankers and oil spills. So while we're talking about the cost, the cost we will incur with the LNG importation, we have to take into account that this does have a lot of environmental impacts as more tankers come into the area. The developments will also result in, next slide please, land reclamation for LNG infrastructure. So we're looking at, of course, as we build out more facilities in the area, there will be sedimentation, increase of dirt and soil in the water. In the area of Ilihan specifically, it was noted that because this was where most of the fish, laid their eggs, and where they used to do that has now been suffering from sedimentation and reclamation. A lot of the fishing population that used to benefit the fisherfolk there is no longer available. Next slide, please. So we see a clear threat to marine life and food security. The dredging activities from laying down the pipelines needed by the plant will go past and destroy seagrass meadows, and there will be chemical wastewater utilized for the plant operations. This can bring serious harm to marine ecosystem and impact the food chain. Generally, of course, as already highlighted, there is a threat of oil spill and other environmental damages from the fossil gas industry that will not only impact the Verde Island Passage, which is the center of this part of this discussion, but will also affect the other provinces surrounding the area because of the interconnectivity of the waters. And as I've previously highlighted, it will impact the fisher folks' livelihood. There is already a record of reduction of number and species of fish and chemical waste contaminating the water, making it unsafe as a habitat for species. There are also records of damages to boats due to the waves, of the stronger waves there in the area, and then, of course, health impacts due to emissions of LNG ships and facilities. Because this will eventually impact the quality of the air, we're highlighting that methane is the primary component of LNG. It is colorless, odorless gas. So while it might be highlighted that there's no black smoke the way there is black smoke when we burn coal, actually what we're highlighting here is that just because we don't see it doesn't mean there are no emissions. So methane on its own will cause loss of consciousness, vomiting, difficulty breathing, forgetfulness, blurry vision, and headaches for the communities in the area where the projects will stand. Next slide, please. Apart from carbon dioxide and methane, fossil gas also produces carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen oxides. Although it does less than coal, but it will eventually emit those. And it can worsen diseases such as skin, heart, and lung ailments, as well as cause acid rain and premature death. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. These, of course, have encouraged protests and resistance and cases on the ground from frontline communities, from fisherfolk groups, from civil society. As an example, there are now 5 complaints against a specific LNG project because of various environmental violations such as premature tree cutting, illegal tree cutting, violation of their environmental impact assessment process, premature land conversion, and the impact on water quality. The communities from host sites have already expressed opposition on the ground. Next slide, please. Resulting in projects withdrawing and resulting in financial institutions taking action, such as the Japan Bank for International Cooperation's investigation over environmental violations of an LNG terminal in Batangas. In contrast to all of this, there is actually a study by Climate Analytics which shows that a 1.5 future is possible for the Philippines, and that we do have the capacity for 100% renewable energy. And to be able to meet our climate commitments, we need to phase out coal by 2030 to 2035 and fossil gas by 2035 to 2040. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Here we have a comparison of the current of the studies as far as capacity, a 1.5 compatible scenario, compared with the current policy projections. So we know that it's possible, and we know what needs to happen so that we're able to reach the 1.5 commitment. What we're saying is that if we're really going to push through with gas as a transition fuel, there should be a sunset clause. It should be clear where we're headed and where this is coming to an end. Also, we're emphasizing here that just because it's cleaner than coal doesn't mean it's clean. It will have environmental impacts. It has had environmental impacts. Communities have suffered, and communities are resisting on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Can you include in I don't think I have a copy, no? We don't have yet. Okay, we have. So, yeah, I'm looking at it. Can you include your proposal for the storage issue on renewables, no? Because like I said, I am just learning about this, and I am a big supporter of renewables, but I'll need your help in telling us what are the solutions, because I understand it is expensive, but of course everything else is expensive, so there must be ways that we can find, and whatever other solutions you have, no, so we can support that sustainable development goal that I'm sure we're all, well, like I said, we're all aware of. And if somebody wasn't aware, I made them aware by including it in my statement. Okay, and then how long will that take? Because in the meantime, that's why nga transition fuel, because we just really need to get from point A to point B. It's not one step, no, it's so that will all help us. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So we're done with everyone at least being able to make their presentation. I'll give the floor to Senator Alan for his questions, and then
Thank
I
you.
might have a few follow-ups. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me start with a biblical principle, di ba? Kung ano ang ating itatanim, yun din ang ating aanihin. Kasi I think that's the... I know what you're trying to say, Attorney Montelibano, di ba, na agnostic in terms of fuel, but within the regulation and the policy. So I think it's just more of polishing that statement, di ba? And of course, after hearing Attorney, sorry, malabo mata ko, Tisha, no? Very clear, especially yung ending mo. And that's where I want to start out, di ba? Do we all agree that there are three main issues or three main goals: energy security, the environment, and the lowest cost to our consumers, which includes the foreign investors and local investors who will also use electricity para nga lalong mag-develop yung ating bansa. And unfortunately, the three should always go together but are sometimes in conflict with each other. So if I say that I want the most efficient transport system and someone invents a 50-seater jeepney pero diesel siya, it might be cheapest pero it might be the worst polluter. Diba? So you have to find the balance. At wala namang perfect, diba? Ang railway may advantage, disadvantage, no? So, kasi if we all agree on that, diba, that it's energy security, then we'll have less debate. No, what do I mean by that? Kasi I'll go to that later, Attorney Valles, no? Pero nabanggit mo lang kanina na kasi paano kung mas mahal 'yan? Bakit 'yan ang bibilin natin just because it's indigenous? So are we saying wag na tayong mag-produce ng bigas? Kasi mas mura talaga ang bigas ng Thailand at saka ng Vietnam eh. So wag na tayong mag-food security, pinakamura, import na lang natin lahat ng bigas natin. We're not saying that, di ba? In fact, we're going to self-sufficiency because we see that there's value beyond that. I do agree, as a distributor, trabaho mo yan na try to get the lowest cost. But that's why you have DOE and ERC to balance these three policies, di ba? So the point I want to make is even before we pass this law, I want to dig into are we really maximizing Malampaya? Remember, one of my regrets in the last administration is hindi natuloy yung joint exploration between the Philippines and China in the West Philippine Sea. Kasi kung natuloy yun, we could have gotten a better deal than Malampaya. We could have been more energy secure and hindi tayo nagra-rush netong mauubos yung oil ng Malampaya. But ang problema, if walang incentive to buy indigenous, di bali wala rin pala kahit na makuha natin yung mga offshore ngayon, no? So I want to start there with your permission, Madam Chair. So Sir Valles, have you read na yung kay Mr. Tiglao na article?
Yes, Madam Chair. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Yeah.
So, let me go to the TOR for bidding of one of the CSPs ng Meralco. Meron po kayong nakalagay doon na if the plant is more than 10 years old, disqualified sila.
Wala po kaming ganung sinulat sa aming TOR, either for the 1,800 megawatt or for the 1,200 megawatt.
So, you're denying that? Wala
Wala
yun?
po kaming sinabing yung mga 10 years or older ay disqualified.
Okay. So, qualified sila to bid?
Lilinawin ko lang po, Your Honor. Ang nakasulat po, dalawa po yung CSP ng Meralco that was
Okay.
conducted almost simultaneously. No? Yung isa po, 1,800 megawatt, that was conducted for Greenfield. And the previous guidance to us by the Department of Energy on what Greenfield is that those plants that are operational as of January 2020. So we limited those bidders to January 2020, those operational by January 2020.
And that's why both of us are lawyers. And that's why masama tingin sa atin lawyers. Kasi you disqualified the older plants. Binaliktad mo lang Sinabi mo lang that they should be
Yes, pero
older. So, the answer to my first question, yes, they're disqualified. Pero may reason kayo kung bakit yung DOE. Wag tayong paikot-ikot kasi pareho tayong abogado
yes, Your Honor, pero hindi po yun 10 years. I think 4 or 5 years lang yun.
Oh.
And then pangalawa
Yeah,
po,
so you said you didn't disqualify older plants So you
sabi-
could have said na, sir, it's disqualified because ang DOE ganon. Kaso sa PAIC, you could have corrected me sa 10.
Yes.
Diba? Kasi we all have limited time
Yes, Your Honor.
Diba? So wag tayong magpaka-abogado dito. Let's talk frankly and directly.
Yes.
Okay, so sa 1,800, ang guidance sa inyo, only plants that were
operational as of January 2020.
2020.
Yun po ang ginawa naming Part ng TOR.
Okay. So you disqualified all the plants that were operational before that.
For the 1,800.
For the 1,800.
Your Honor, because the objective of that bidding
Can
was
we
to
confirm
encourage
that sa
greenfield.
DOE? Did you give that guidance?
That's just the definition of what is a greenfield. But the TOR is actually drafted by the distributor, sir. Yung Meralco yung gumagawa ng terms of reference nila.
So that means that 1,800 pwedeng hindi greenfield.
It depends on what they want, sir. We just review it. I think yung sinasabi lang ni Attorney Valles that for DOE, what the definition of a greenfield is, no?
Yes.
Pero we did
So
not
you did not tell them na
dapat
kailangan greenfield
Yes,
yung
sir.
1,800 mo. So ito yung sinasabi kong wag tayong mag-lawyering dito. Wala akong problema sa apples to apples. Kung sasabihin nyo, lahat ng contracts simula ngayon, greenfield lahat, di isara na natin lahat ng before that kasi wala nang gagamit, di ba? But the point I'm driving to is because of that simple decision, you disqualified yung mga Malampaya plants using Malampaya or gas. Tama po ba? That's the net effect of that, di ba?
For the 1,800, Your Honor, kasi nga po, ang objective ng bidding na yan was to encourage greenfield. Pero yung 1,200 po naman na megawatt, which is kasabay nun, ay kasama po doon
Sige.
yung plants operational prior to January
I'll go with
2020.
that kasi I just have a problem with sometimes wanting to be pro-environment and sometimes going to cost. Pero pag tinignan mo na kung sino mga may-ari ng planta, parang hindi naman yung environment ang tinitignan natin. No? So, ang nanalo nung 1,800, GNP Power 600 megawatts, Masinloc 600 megawatts, and Excellent Energy 1,200 megawatts. Tama po ba?
Ang nanalo po ay GN Power 300 megawatts, and then Masinloc 300 megawatts, and then Excellent Energy 1,200 megawatts.
So, total ng
1,800.
And then, Excellent Energy belongs to the San Miguel Group.
Yes, Your Honor.
Masinloc is also San Miguel Group.
Yes, Your Honor.
GNP is Aboitiz Group, no?
Yes, Your Honor.
So, all of them are coal, right?
Excellent Energy is LNG.
Okay. So, GNP Power is coal and Masinloc is coal. And then, Excellent Energy is LNG.
Yes, Your
Okay.
Honor.
So, from, Ma'am Tricia, hindi na papahabain, but parang sa akin kasi, what's the term ulit? Green? Gusto nyo greenfield, pero pinanalo yung coal rather than Malampaya gas. Okay, so now, looking at the instructions to bidder, there's a paragraph that reads that provided that the power plant should be operational not later than 2020, but not later than May 2025, no? Are you familiar with power plants of first gen in Batangas? I was looking at the website. The name is San Gabriel, San Lorenzo, Santa Rita, and Avion.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Do you know that they all run on Malampaya gas?
I do know that Santa Rita, San Lorenzo, and San Gabriel run on Malampaya. I'm not so sure about
And
Avion.
as of now, they're the only ones running on Malampaya gas, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. So, do you know when this plant started operation?
I can verify, Your Honor.
But more or less, hindi 2020.
Yes, Your Honor.
Oh,
Much earlier than 2020.
So basically, by just putting that, dinisqualify nyo sila.
For the 1,800,
Yes.
Your Honor.
So based on the website, Santa Rita started operation in 2000, San Lorenzo 2002, Avion and San Gabriel in 2016. So do I understand this correctly? Because of your rule on bidding, power plants have to have started operating later than 2020. All of these Malampaya plants were disqualified from the bidding, di ba? That's the...
May I clarify?
Yes, go
Your
ahead.
Honor? Yes, that was the rule in the TOR. But even if we did not put that rule, the commercial operations date for the 1,800 megawatt start in December 2024. And that's for the 1,200. And then the balance of 600 will kick in in May 2025. Up to May 2025, the Santa Rita and San Lorenzo contracts are still live. I mean, they're still existing with Meralco because their contracts will
Yes,
expire.
it's existing pero kine-question nyo yung charge, di ba, sa ERC? Yung ba yun o iba pa yun? You're questioning, di ba, their pricing kasi nagbago na after 25 years?
Well, that's a different matter, Your Honor.
Yeah, but
There
it's
is-
intimately related, di ba?
Yes, Your Honor.
Oh.
Pero my point is that these contracts are still existing.
Yes, but
So
your
they
point
could not
is
have
even if you
participated in the
didn't
bid.
have that greenfield, parang sinasabi mo, they would not have won or they would not have participated. You don't know that for a fact. Eh.
No, because the COD, Your Honor, the commercial operations date of the 1,800 must start on December 2024. So they could not have participated because they cannot operate by December 2024. They cannot supply power to Meralco for this 1,800 starting December 2024 because they still have a contract with us, the entire 1,500 megawatt, until August 2025, I think, and 2027.
And if they have a contract with you, they cannot have another contract with you?
Because it's fully contracted, Your Honor.
Yung,
The
yung
entire
capacity nila?
is fully contracted.
Okay. So I'll go back to that. How about the Ilihan power plant? When did it start operating?
I'm not so sure, Your Honor, but
Di ba it's still under construction and start operating the end of the year, 2024?
you might be referring to Excellent Energy, Your Honor. Excellent Energy, the one that won the bidding, yes.
Yes.
Your Honor.
So, pwedeng mag-bid kahit hindi pa tapos?
Yes, Your Honor. Precisely because we're encouraging plants that are greenfield, in other words, bago po or i-build pa lang para magkaroon tayo ng additional capacity.
Paano kung ma-delay?
Kung ma-delay po, halimbawa po na-approve na yung nanalo sila sa bidding at nagkaroon kami ng power supply agreement at na-approve ng ERC at hindi po nila natayo ang planta within the period na nakaprescribe doon sa kontrata, meron pong appropriate penalty sa kontrata.
So, ang question, what if, when you're asked about it, sagot nyo the ERC, this requirement was in line with DOE's guidance. So do you mean it's still the greenfield guidance or were you saying that may guidance ang DOE na pwede na mag-contract kahit na hindi pa nagtapos yung construction? Which of the two? Just to clarify.
May I clarify? I'm sorry, Your Honor, hindi ko
Di
po
ba the ERC actually wrote to DOE to confirm that it did indeed gave Meralco guidance? Kasi the ERC was questioning the requirement nung pagiging greenfield. Did the ERC question that? Can you clarify for me, please?
Your Honor, no, we wrote our observations to the terms of reference of Meralco, including that item on, it was a long list, but it included that item on Greenfield. So hindi lang naman po yung point ng Greenfield.
Yeah, and what was your point about yung greenfield?
That greenfield in the traditional sense is something that is not yet built, not yet financed. So normally, you need the power supply agreement to obtain financing for the plant. So our question then, our concern was, how can you define greenfield including a period that was past? If the plant is already there, operational, we found it difficult to consider them as greenfield because it already obtained financing, it already was
So
constructed.
ayoko lang humaba para nakatali din lang dito, but I know there'll be a lot of forums to look into that, no? So I'm not an expert on CSPs, no, on energy, unlike Senator Win. Sister ko inabot pa nung chairman ang father ko nung first Powercom, no? But hindi ako expert dito. But it does not really take an expert to see that yung point ni Mr. Tiglao na parang may pinili na yung Meralco by just the terms of reference. To put in that arbitrary rule will prevent first-gen plants from bidding. Parang ayaw ng Meralco sa Malampaya, di ba? Even the DOE and ERC nga had some questions about this, but Did you address those concerns about yung definition yun ng greenfield?
Yes, Your Honor, we replied to the chairman.
And what was your reply? Kasi kung ang definition ng greenfield, hindi kasama yung operation na, sinunod nyo pa rin yung sa inyo na 2020 pa rin ang binigay nyong date.
May I explain?
Yeah, please.
Una po sa lahat, yung tungpong 1,800 megawatt, nanggaling po ito dun sa unang 1,800 megawatt na pina-CSP namin. Panahon pa po ito ni Presidente Duterte at ni Secretary Cusino, na ang guidance to us is encourage greenfield, so that is what we propose, and that, yan po ang binigay nilang guidance sa amin.
Sorry, sir. Encourage greenfield at gawin nyo yung greenfield are two different things. But I agree with you. Sige, encourage greenfield. But kung tinatanong nga nung ERC, bakit yung definition nyo ng greenfield kasama na yung operational na?
Kasi po, kung mapapaliwanag ko
So
lang.
hindi tunay na greenfield yon. So it was arbitrary on you to put 2020. You could have put 2015, you could have put 2010. Tama po ba? Mali? No, just on that point, tama o mali?
Niretain lang po namin yung unang guidance sa amin ng DOE nung previous 1,800
Which is?
na January 2020. Kaya naman
But that
po,
is an arbitrary number. Now knowing the definition ng greenfield.
kasi po, Your Honor,
Yes or no, sir? It's an arbitrary number.
hindi naman po arbitrary. Pinag-isipan po namin yun.
No,
Kasi po,
it's only arbitrary or not arbitrary.
hindi nga po arbitrary.
It's not arbitrary. Okay, so the definition of greenfield, ma'am, pakiulit po.
Traditionally po, greenfield means it is not yet being constructed and
Okay.
it is not yet existing.
So, not existing, not constructed. You made your own definition ng greenfield. You put your own date. So how can that not be arbitrary?
Kasi nga po, pinaliliwanag ko, meron po kaming naging basihan. Ang maliban po dun sa previous guidance.
Yeah, but your basihan, kayo lang gumawa. That's not the traditional na everyone. So if the whole Senate says our definition of tasa is this, and Meralco, with all your power, says yan ang definition ng tasa, hindi arbitrary kayo because pinag-isipan nyo naman na mukha din naman tasa. Di ba? I mean, we know the definition of arbitrary. Arbitrary means, di ba, there's a consensus among everyone and you choose your own definition. It doesn't matter kung pinag-isipan nyo ng 1 million years yon. There's a definition of greenfield, hindi nyo pala sinunod eh. Then you keep pointing on DOE. I'll go to my next point, no? Yun nga, yung where I interjected kanina, that the cost of using imported LNG, ang sabi ni Mr. Tiglao, it's not really $12 per unit. Kasi meron din cost of bringing in, katulad ng to regasify it, transport, etc. No? But when it is used by the power plant, it has to be turned back to gas. So i-regasify mo pa siya. So dun sa cost, no? Yung additional mga cost na to, this is also passed to the consumer, right?
Yes, Your Honor, under the terms of reference.
So you disagree, kasi I was listening to you intently sa presentation nyo eh. Kasi parang sa opening pa lang ng DOE, sinabi na nila na historically, and if you look at it, mas mura ang Malampaya gas. It seems that Meralco is arguing, not you personally, sir, you're just the representative naman. So I'm addressing, sorry if I seem personal, but I'm addressing it to Meralco as a juridical entity. So Meralco seems to think, what's the stand of Meralco? Mas mura talaga Malampaya gas o mas mahal? Or
I think, Your
in
Honor,
general, I mean, of
yes.
course, may averages.
Yes, Your Honor. In fact, mas mura po. In fact, to be very, very candid and honest, during the bidding for the 1,200 megawatt, we expected the bidder using Indigenous to win. But it turned out that based on the results that it was 1 peso and 30 plus centavos higher.
Yeah.
We were
I don't want to
surprised.
go into the bidding kasi I didn't study it and I don't want to, say dapat ito nanalo, ganyan lang ang nanalo. I just wanted to point out nga na sa energy security kasi, something like crane wire, something like na we keep talking about Taiwan. God forbid that there'll be a conflict between the mainland and Taiwan dahil backyard na natin yan, di ba? Or God forbid that there will be powerful storms that will affect whether the delivery of coal or natural gas. But the reality is, when you talk about security, parang bigas, you need a production. At kung hindi bibilin yung Malampaya gas sa atin, kasi you have to aggregate it, di ba? Kasi kung hindi mo i-aggregate, talagang hihintayin ko lang kailan pinakamura yung gas, natural gas abroad, at yun ay bibigay kong price. Di ba may kaso ngayon sa Supreme Court din, yung one of the, on the financial agreement? Tama ba, ma'am? Can you give us the 1-minute version? I just want to make a point on that, di ba?
Those involve the two contracts of Meralco that were terminated, Your Honor. One of which involves Ilihan, which is a natural gas plant that terminated its contract. It had a fixed price, and then they said they needed to adjust. So the majority of the commission disapproved the adjustment. They went all the way to the CA, and now we're in the Supreme
Well,
Court.
we're all lawyers, so of course we're waiting for the Supreme Court and we'll respect their interpretation. But ang point ko is that if they uphold, if they do not grant the MR, so it appears, di ba, na kahit na nagbigay ka ng price at may ganong kaka-ironclad na agreement, pag tumaas worldwide yung presyo, ipapas mo pa rin sa consumer, di ba? So ang point ko nun is that if you already saw na 10 years stable yung sa Malampaya, and when I say Malampaya, I'm not favoring Malampaya per se. I'm trying to get everyone in the energy sector to invest in having Malampaya 2, Malampaya 3, Malampaya 4 all around the country wherever it is. But the reality is just like mining, mineral resource development, napakamahal at marami kang, it's years, it's so much money, and marami kang itetest dyan tapos wala pala, so you have to go to the next. So unless we set the environment and the policy to make this viable, we'll never do it. Di ba? I mean, look at rice. Many of our rice farmers are giving up. Mga anak nila ayaw na. Naghahanap na ng ibang trabaho precisely nga kasi we haven't found a way to make it commercially viable for them. Ano? Sir Valles, at around the same time na may 1.8, you keep referring to the 1.8 kasi meron din 1.2 na CSP at that time, right? Okay. Now, for whatever reason, the greenfield requirement in 1,008 was not found in the 1.2 CSP, correct?
Yes, Your Honor, because the COD for the 1,200 is supposed to be December 2023. So it's not possible to limit it to the greenfield or to the newer plants.
That's not correct, totally correct, di ba? Kasi kayo naman nagde-determine ng definition ng greenfield. Eh. So if you define greenfield as 2015 plant, di pwede pa rin. Tama?
Kung ganun po yung definition. Pero
Yes. So I mean, kayo nagbigay ng definition, tapos kayo nagsabing tama sa 1800 pero hindi pwede dun sa 1200. Pero internationally, hindi yun ang definition ng greenfield. Correct?
yes, Your Honor, if I may just explain.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, yung although ganun po ang nasa TOR namin, kaya po namin yun kini-clear sa regulator at saka sa Department of Energy, no. Hindi naman po namin ini-implement ang TOR kung hindi aprobado ng Department of Energy. And sometimes they make comments, even the ERC as mentioned kanina, si Chair Mona made comments, no. So we consider as much as possible the comments of the regulator and the Department of Energy.
I do fully understand. You know, unlike other contracts, unlike, let's say, Yusek Garin in Congress, in her many terms in Congress, daming hearings on trade and industry, on economic, siyatang economic affairs. There are certain regulators that they can be very decisive or very, what do you call this, deliberate very soon because nga it doesn't have a tsunami type of effect. So dito, of course, they're being cautious, saying do this, don't do this, Meralco, kasi nga grabe yung epekto at saka matagal to eh. Matagal to put up a power plant, may mga problema tayo sa national grid, etc. So, but yung sinabi mong we follow them as much as possible, hindi totoo yun. Because nung nag-comment sila about Greenfield, you still followed what you want eh. You said as much as possible. Oh, it's possible na hindi na Greenfield ang ginawa niyong bidding ng 1.8. It's possible na binago niyo yung definition ng Greenfield. You didn't do it eh. So it's not true that as much as possible. Basically, kung ano lang yung but anyway, there'll be other venues. Doon na lang sa franchise hearing nyo ko iti-take up yung whether sinusunod nyo yung DOE or ERC, no? So dito sa instruction to bidders, you said that pursuant to DOE advisory, gas-fired power plants were highly encouraged to bid and prioritize the use of indigenous gas. Tama naman po, di ba? So nandun yon. So, in fact, a Malampaya fuel plant, say, San Gabriel of first gen, did bid, right? Okay. But apparently, San Gabriel bid higher than the price cap or reserved by Meralco, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. The LCOE reserve bid was 7.15 while San Gabriel's bid was 8.45. Tama?
Yes, Your Honor.
Who won the bid?
The one that was won by San Miguel's SPPC, Your Honor, yung Ilihan
South
plant.
Premier Power, no?
South Premier Power.
Hindi ba Ilihan din yan?
Yes, Your Honor, that's Ilihan Power Plant.
So Ilihan has a new one and an older one.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. So both got to one under your rules. Because dun sa isang rule, pasok sila sa greenfield. Dito naman sa isang rule, dahil hindi nyo greenfield, kahit luma siya, 2000 pa siya, nanalo siya.
Yes, Your Honor.
So you see
Nanalo.
how your rules can dictate kung who can win or not. I'm not saying niluto nyo. I'm referring to the article of Mr. Tiglao, who's been very consistent over the years in pagbabantay ng power, no? I'm saying kasi I wanna take this up at a later date with ERC and DOE na once every 25 years lang yung franchise. Yun lang yung time namin. I'm blessed to have, I don't know if you were senator na nung first 25 years nila. Kasi naabutan ko pa yun. So, and that's the only way where you can make real changes. Of course, yung laws then, no? So let me get this straight, Madam Chair. The first CSP prohibited older plants from joining. So the Ilihan plant won, and the second one, bawal sila. So if you look at the news articles, it seems that the time that Meralco did the CSP, Ilihan terminated its old PSA with Meralco kasi nalulugi sila. That's the case, no? So Ilihan was looking for a contract with Meralco and Ilihan wins the 1-2. So parang ganda ng timing nung pasok nung lahat. Sa isang kontrata, bawal sila. Kasi old. Sa isang pwede na sila. Kasi 2000. And then, dahil nalugi sila doon, tinanggal nila yung PSA, pasok naman sila ngayon, no? So, of the 3,000 total CSP, Ilihan imported gas plant won 2-4. And how much did Malampaya get? Yeah, sir. Okay lang.
Sorry, Malampaya did not win, or First Gas did not win.
So zero. Okay. I'm not saying it's totally on Meralco, and I think your ERC is still reviewing. But ito yung point din ni Attorney Montelibano and Attorney Soresca, no? If you don't look at the environment at energy security lang, why don't we just have bakit hindi na lang lahat coal? Di ba coal ang pinakamura? Tama ba? Anong pinakamura? No, I mean, take out everything. Take out the environment and everything. Ano pinakamura?
Currently po, solar po. Yung,
Ba't hindi pwedeng base load ang solar?
yung
di ba?
base load.
Oo.
Sa base load po, theoretically coal, Your Honor. Pero
Theoretically coal. Yeah, just
kanina
making a
po
point. I'm
nag-uusap
not
kami.
proposing this. I'm just making a
Yeah.
point. Di ba? Kung ganito din tayo na paikot-ikot tayong lahat and magdidebate tayo, I fully get what Attorney Sorescas, we have two people in the room na extreme and some in the middle. Some will say she's totally correct. Huwag niyong sirain yung environment. You have the totally naman iba na you cannot industrialize, walang kuryente. Miss Soresca, yung mic na ginamit mo, galing sa mining at galing sa kuryente yan. So, pati yung salamin natin dalawa. So, hindi, nag-laser ka na ata. O, laser, galing din sa ano yan. So, kuryente din yan. But my point is, we're trying to find the balance. It's not a perfect world, no? And we'll not all agree sa balance. But my point is to bring it back sa DOE and ERC, assuming Meralco is maximizing profits, not only for itself, but because also of its partnerships, whether pwede o hindi, formal or informal with other generators. I'm not accusing, I'm speaking out loud, I did not follow completely kung ano ang pwede at hindi na, di ba, between the owners ng Meralco and the generators. But I'm saying, kailangan may mag-referee. Kailangan may magsabi ng sandali lang, ang tamang mix ganito, which you have in your long-term plan. Di ba? Pero sa actual na bidding, walang ganun eh. Di ba? That's why we're looking at this bill, Sir Valles. I agree with some of your points kanina. Kung ekonomista ako purely, sabihin ko tama yung sinabi mo kanina. Kaya lang, kung mag-agree ako doon, coal lahat ang gagamitin natin. Wala tayong magiging mix dyan, no? So, fast forward ko na kasi I'm taking too much time. Meron kayong CSP up, no, ng August 2? Tama ba?
Sorry, Your Honor.
Meron kayong ongoing?
We recently concluded renewable energy CSP for 500 megawatt. And
Yun yung
we
sa
have
August 2? Ano yung sa
and,
August 2? Bid ba yan? Or?
Maybe that is the 600 megawatt CSP.
O,
for
anong
base
rule
load.
ang gagamitin nyo dun sa August 2?
It's a brownfield. It's open to both brownfield and greenfield power plants, Your Honor. In fact, first gen, which is using Malampaya, and I'm not sure if they're using also LNG for this purpose.
And malinaw ang rules.
participated.
Malinaw ang rules doon.
Malinaw naman po lagi yung...
Sige, but let's all pretend that this group in my left is not from DOE and ERC. This group over here are not senators, and you're not representing the private companies, whether distribution, and you're not an environmentalist over there, no? We're just ordinary Filipinos brainstorming, watching the news. And I'm not proposing lutuin nyo at ipanalo nyo yung Malampaya sa August 2. But kung matalo at zero pa rin sila, can we honestly say that we're promoting indigenous gas in the Philippines? If the rules, if all of us are saying pinakamura, and then all of us are saying dapat may mix at gamitin sarili, pero talo sila sa bid parate, or bawal sila mag-bid, or meron pa silang ganon, tapos meron pa naman pala sila na kaya nilang i-supply, why would foreign investors come in to dig more wells for indigenous sa atin? Diba? So ako, Madam ERC, I think you should postpone that August 2 and look and sort this out muna. I don't envy your job. Right now, I'd rather be in this. And I mean, many times kaming mga senators, we think we know the solution and want to be in your position for a few minutes. But in this case, I don't know the solution kasi hindi nyo naman pwedeng lutuin. Hindi naman sagot pag tingin natin luto, counter luto. Diba? But on the other hand, hindi pwedeng present situation natin ngayon eh. Diba? And anyway, there'll be a lot of venues, Madam Chair, but I'm just a little bit dumbfounded why we have EFIRA na inabot ko din yan. So let me close this way, di ba? I started with a biblical principle. Kung ano itanim yan, ang anihin mo. Hindi tayo nagtatanim ng environmentally friendly, hindi tayo nagtatanim ng minimum cost, hindi tayo nagtatanim ng energy security. But let me close with this. Be careful what we pray for. Because law student ako noon, nasa UP ako before being a law student at Ateneo, we were praying, bakit ang Malaysia may oil? Bakit ang Middle East may oil? Bakit sabi nila sa US may, bakit ang Pilipinas wala? And then we discovered Malampaya. And then now we don't wanna use it. No? And we do know na sa West Philippine Sea meron. We do know that there are other places in the country na meron. But unless we fix this, I don't know if this legislation is the answer. I'm still studying it. But I do know that even without this legislation, we can do better, no? Whether it's Meralco or whether it's the other Attorney Montilivo, no, I hear you, no. Given a set of rules, you only have to kung ano pinakamura. But if we fix the rules na eto pang ganito, eto pang ganyan, I hope, let me finish na, I hope we find a solution na pwedeng pang baseload yung wind at saka solar para wala nang problema. And I cannot finish without, thanking also Congressman Cuangco, who's also forcing us to look at nuclear energy. No? So I'll stop there, Madam Chair, and thank you for this time. But I'd like to reiterate na I think the DOE and ERC should seriously look at, stopping muna kasi it wouldn't cause too much delay, and clarifying all of these rules at saka yung pending cases para hindi ka pwede mag-basketball o volleyball or anong game tapos hindi klaro kung anong rules eh. Tsaka hindi pwedeng, hindi naman parang yung 1800 volleyball yan, eto rules. Yung 1200 basketball yan, eto rules. Pero yung player, yung team, yung mga power generators, sila din pala. Yung bola, ganun din pala. Di ba? So pareho naman palang football ang laro. Pero yung rules sa una, rules ng basketball. Yung pangalawa, rules ng volleyball. And then football. So, nadidictate tuloy ng Meralco kung sinong magsusupply sa kanila. I don't think that was the intention ng EFIRA law. No? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Alan. I'm giving the floor to Senator Gatchalian. Do you think you can wrap up by 4 p.m.? Is that fair enough? 4:05. Because before you arrived, I said that we will not exceed 4 o'clock. So I will give you 5 minutes extra. But the floor is all yours. I will refrain, Senator Alan, from interrupting you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try to finish everything in 30 minutes. No? 30 minutes. Okay. And Senator Alan has started and asked a lot of important questions, and I'll take off where he left off. I'll start off with some policy, and Senator Alan touched on this.
Sorry. Would you like to stay here because I think the cameras are specifically here.
Sige, pwede naman.
Yeah. Because I noticed naggalawan sila, so or here.
Move from Banban to Fora.
Okay, sige. Or ako na lang gagalaw. Ako na lang gagalaw.
Ayaw mo akong katabi, ha?
No, stay here.
Madam Chairman. Senator Alan is absolutely correct, and I think everyone in the energy sector knows the proverbial energy trilemma, where you have to balance the environment, pricing, as well as security. So it's a very difficult balance that not only the Philippines is undertaking, but the entire world is undertaking. And you have to, this is where responsive policy and regulation comes into play, because as technology changes, as fuel prices changes, policy and regulation should also adapt, especially technology. Technology is very difficult to predict. 5 years ago, wind is not as competitive. Now it's becoming very competitive. 10 years ago, solar is expensive. Now it's also very competitive, albeit it's not base load, but partner it with other technologies, it can compete. So I'll take off from there. And I saw in the DOE presentation, and if the ComSec can flash the DOE presentation, on page 2, I noticed that there's already, the transition has already begun. And you can see this from the energy mix that the DOE presented. And just to summarize it, can the ComSec flash it on the screen? The current capacity for, the current share for coal right now is 43%. No? And by 2050, it will go down to 9%. No? And then renewable, particularly, well, all your renewable, from 29%, it will jump to 70%. So that's almost 2/3 of our entire energy mix. And half of it will come from wind and solar. No? 21% wind, and then solar 37%. So that's 57%. But I also noticed that our traditional base load, technologies such as coal, went down. Nat gas will increase by a little bit from 13 to 60%. I don't know, 2050 ba? 24/7 na ang araw? 24/7 na ba ang wind? Because how do we power ourselves at night? So this is a policy question. I support the transition. In fact, I filed a bill which is in this committee to already legislate a transition policy. So that I believe in transition. In this particular industry, changes cannot be abrupt because we're talking about pricing and we're talking about consumer welfare. So we need to transition. And I truly appreciate and support the transition of the DOE reflected in their PEP. However, I do appreciate the aggressive transition, but how do we, I want to understand, how do we balance the intermittent technology, especially when wind is not blowing and the sun is not out?
Madam Chair. For example, Madam Chair, the next auction, problems batteries. So what we are planning, this next auction will be for pump storage, which is also a way of storing energy from the renewables. But this will be the fourth, and the fifth will be a cluster. The proposal, what we're thinking is a cluster. You have renewable plus battery. So we're trying to encourage more players in the battery systems, and as well as hopefully it will trigger more technology, better technology to come in. Ang pangbawi lang for now on the transition side is the natural gas, because coal is moratorium, we're depleting on that. So doon muna ang trying to encourage the incoming battery technology to come in. But yes, we do recognize that there's still limitation, but we do believe that the technology will improve fast enough to catch up. By 2050 pa naman to, Madam Chair, ang target.
We need to plan, no? And one thing I learned from this industry is long-term vision and planning is very important. No? Almost like having a crystal ball on your hands, because to build plants takes time. To build all of these technologies take time to build, and so you need to forecast very well, so that you will know exactly when all of these capacities will come in. I just want to flag DOE. I support the transition. I really appreciate that the DOE has really put hard numbers in the transition. However, let's review the technologies that we are going to promote by 2050. Because obviously some technologies have limitations like solar and wind. So having said that, this is where natural gas will come in. And natural gas has been touted by many jurisdictions as the transition fuel. And I believe that it is the transition fuel. Unless batteries will go down dramatically in terms of price, and we all know batteries, we need a lot of minerals also. And minerals is becoming very controversial right now because you have to go to remote places to mine minerals. So the most logical and feasible technology right now is natural gas. And that's where we are right now in terms of promoting and making sure that the technologies making sure that natural gas technologies that come to our country is competitive, and as well as it will redound to consumer benefit. So I'll go into that because that's the topic at hand. And I also appreciate that finally, after I think 30 years, tama ba, Donna? This is the first time we will be seeing true exploration. marami kasing paper exploration eh. Remember, maraming nagpe-press release, mag-explore sila, maraming mag-press release, magdi-drill sila. But after reading all those press releases for the past few years, nothing happened. But I believe that we now have a serious company, a serious player who will undertake actual drilling. During my stint as the committee chair, I talked to Shell and Chevron in the past, and they're very optimistic in what they call the near wells. I think they were saying, at least the briefing that I got, that may potential pa dyan. There is still oil and gas, especially gas that can be retrieved. And therefore, the life of Malampaya can be extended for a few more years, and we can enjoy indigenous sources in the next few years. So I'm very happy to hear that there's a potential to. There's now real activity in that area, and real drilling will happen. And I just want to ask some questions about regulation. I would like to direct this to Chair Mona. In our system right now, in our current system right now, the ERC, make it simple. No, I know this is very technical. The ERC regulates the rates the DUs charge to consumers. Correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
And also here in your presentation, it also approves the PSA between distribution utilities and GenCos. No?
Tama po.
So we're not only regulating the rates charged to consumers, we're also regulating the PSAs. Can you explain that so that everyone will be on the same
Sige po.
page?
Apo. The PSAs that are contracted by the DUs for their captive customers are filed with the ERC for the approval of the rates. So we approve the rates, but there are provisions of the PSA that affect the rates. For example, Your Honor, it's not just the rate formula that we look at. We look at the term, because the term has an impact on the rate. Because when the DU, for example, assesses the LCOE, the levelized cost of energy or electricity over time, they make certain assumptions over that dimension of time. So we need to also confirm that provision. Second, for example, penalties, because they also impact on the rate, like penalty for replacement power or exceedance of outages. So in the course of reviewing and approving the rates, we necessarily have to review other terms of the power supply agreement.
Do you also disapprove the PSA? Is there a scenario wherein you disapprove? I know you reduced the electricity rates, diba? There may mga ganyan, maraming ganyan na cases. But do you actually disapprove power supply agreements?
I can only recall one particular instance because I was already part of the commission then. When the procurement process is flawed, then that leads to a disapproval of the PSA. Like those PSAs that were invalidated by the Supreme Court for non-compliance with the CSP requirement, we had to invalidate the PSA. So that's the top of my head, that's the main thing that would invalidate the PSA.
You also look at the, for example, because the PSAs will contain pricing, no? Do you also approve the pricing of those supply? For example, if it's the PSAs, for example, gas supply, no? And they're may presyo doon ng gas. Do you approve also the actual price of that gas, or rates lang in approve natin?
I was explaining earlier, Your Honor, that the fuel cost, which is a component of the generation charge, we necessarily have to review that also. Most of the time, it's not a fixed fuel cost because the fuel cost is normally, it only appears in coal contracts and oil-based contracts or gas contracts. So they usually use a reference index, and then it moves also over time. So what we approve normally is a formula, and we put a cap, usually an efficiency cap, so that we encourage also the proper maintenance of the unit. So hindi po yung actual na peso per kilowatt in relation to that fuel cost, but normally a formula that would then go into the generation charge.
Prove two things. One is the actual, tama ba? The actual conduct of the bidding. So you review the process of the bidding, whether the bidding has been transparent, and there are rules that cover the bidding for the PSAs.
There is a CSP policy of the DOE, and there is a set of CSP guidelines that are issued by the ERC. There are minimum terms of the power supply agreement that need to be adopted by the DU. So that's in a way, we call it the first level of review, the formal compliance with all these regulatory requirements, and then we go to the pricing before we go to the second level, which is the pricing.
So
review.
the GenCo should also undergo CSP.
If the GenCo sells to a regulated entity, to a DU, then yes, effectively we call it the long arm of the law. Normally, the GenCos are deregulated. But
That's what I'm driving at.
Apa.
Diba deregulated yan?
Apa.
Sa kanila na bahala if you want to negotiate, you want to do CSP, that's your call. But
Yes.
the most important is the rates that you will be
Passing on.
passing on.
Correct.
Is that the process?
Opo. Because they sell to a regulated entity, and the regulated entity cannot pass on any rates that are not approved by the regulator. Effectively, there's that long arm of the law that reaches all the way to the generator.
Okay.
That becomes part of that regulation.
And the GenCos are mandated to conduct bidding in sourcing their fuel supply. Kasi diba, there are two
Opo.
steps I understand.
Correct.
First is to determine whether the bidding process is in accordance with the rules. And then number two, the second level is reasonableness in terms of cost. No? So the first one is a bidding process. I think we all know that's for price discovery and making sure that prices are competitive. No? But are they mandated to do a bidding process?
It depends now on the DU, Your Honor, on how the terms of reference are crafted. We do, I think in our CSP guidelines,
But
we
this is for GenCo lang.
Opo. We don't give any direct instructions po kasi to the GenCo. Our instructions are always to the regulated entity, the DU. And then the DU is the one that interfaces with the GenCos. But if the DU includes in their TOR, and I think that's our minimum requirement. I'm just checking with our legal that the GenCos would have a fuel supply procurement plan, because that's part of their submission. We will need to evaluate that there is competition in the procurement of fuel. Then it's the DU now that checks or ensures that there is that competitive exercise in the procurement of fuel.
But for example, if the GenCos will negotiate because they find it, kasi ano ito fuel supply ito, no? They will negotiate, and because they think this is the lowest in terms of cost. Is that allowed under the rules of ERC?
That's allowed. What we will look for, Your Honor, is that there is at least before a direct negotiation, for example, there was some form of price discovery still.
Okay.
Whether it's a full-blown tender or solicitation of offers, so that may assurance naman tayo na may arm's length naman yung transaction.
So all GenCos are required to do some form of price discovery, whether bidding or solicitation. That's under the rules.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay,
Yes.
and that's to ensure that the rates that will be passed on to consumers will be competitive, because all of those fuel costs are passed on. Diba? Definitely all, except for RE, of course. No? But all of these traditional technologies, no? Especially fossil fuel, all of the fuel component is passed on to consumers.
That's
I mean, to put it simply, to
Opo,
put it
in
simply.
general.
In general,
Yeah,
yeah.
in general.
In general, oo. So that's why important na may price discovery. That's the most important. All right. Okay. And I want to also, let me, because I'm, meron akong 10 minutes na lang ba, Chairperson? Oo. Let me jump to...
Sorry, but I have a preset ano kasi, so talagang
Sige.
10 minutes ka lang.
I'll jump na lang to Prime Energy. I have some questions all in their PowerPoint presentation. I also saw that in your slide, yung this pricing slide 4. I saw in this slide that, and in your statement also, that you said that Malampaya remains to be the most stable in terms of pricing. No? Can we flash that? I do agree it's stable. I do agree it's competitive. But sometimes I saw also in the slide, and we also have some research, that sometimes LNG is cheaper. Sometimes, no? Ganyan naman talagang word, ang merkado, nagpa-fluctuate yan, di ba? Obviously, the pricing of Malampaya is not linear. No? It's not a straight line. It follows a formula, correct? Can you describe to us, or can you tell us what is the formula?
The formula of Malampaya gas, this is a 20-year-old formula, even more. It was a formula approved way in the beginning when Malampaya had its first GSPA with the Ilihan power plant and first gas power plant. And its composition is very simple. It's actually a very classic formula that also other jurisdictions around the world kind of follow. So it's made up of a basket of indices, crude oils, I believe Dubai, Oman, crude, and then there's a gas oil component there, a fuel oil, and then US CPI to kind of trend it with the market. So the way it's constructed is such that these various indices play off of each other, and therefore, if there are market fluctuations in various areas around the world or one area around the world, something else in the index will offset it, making it pretty stable. Nag-offset lang sila. And then the other component, the other feature of that price formula is such na it will use the index of the past two quarters past, meaning when Malampaya bills its customer today, it uses indices from the last from 6 months ago, which means that if there is a sudden fluctuation in the market, sudden war or whatever, the consumers don't feel it immediately because they would still see the previous index. That's what makes it really stable. Okay, so that's one portion of the formula. The other portion of the formula is what we call the base price. The base price is really like the composition of all the costs that we need to actually explore and develop a service contract. And this base price factor goes down over time. So every quarter, there's a number there. Let's say a 4 point something. It starts with 4 point something on quarter 1. Quarter 2 or 3 or 4, that number keeps going down. And that really just follows a typical cycle of a reservoir when in the beginning you would spend more in order to drill and make gas. And then over time, it goes down because you already have produced the gas and then you don't have to keep investing more until the time that the reservoir depletes again and you have to invest again. That's kind of the cycle it follows. And that's also what happened when the GSPA of our last customer, current customer, First Gas, it expired in 1st January this year. So when it expired, they renewed their GSPA. Then the formula just reset back to the old quarter 1, and it will then, from this point onward, go down in time. So that reset led to a little bit of an increase, and that's actually natural because, as you can see, this is also the point in time when we need to start drilling again. So it's kind of just the cycle we follow. We do that in order to ensure that we continue to extract the gas out of an existing service contract so that we continue to extend its life. That's a very, very typical structure po in contracts.
Yeah. I have a copy. I don't know if this is the updated formula. But I have a copy of the formula. Just don't know if it's the accurate, if that's the formula that you described. But basically, the components there are crude oil components. Tama? There are Dubai crude oil components. There are Oman crude oil components. There's also Platts. Tama ba? Meron bang Platts dito? Oh, sorry. US CPI component. So in other words, a lot of these components are also subject to global shocks. So meaning things that we cannot control here in our country. So the formula is, it's good that the formula is designed to hedge one another. No? As we can see from the flat curve of the graph, but it's not isolated to global shocks. So meaning if something happens abroad, Dubai crude goes up, you know, there's also going to be an effect to Malampaya pricing, correct?
There will be po.
Correct. So,
yeah.
And also when Oman crude goes up, there's also effect on the pricing of Malampaya.
Yeah, there will be. It's just that you see in the graph there, it doesn't move as much as the other prices because those other prices are only indexed to one. And the other features of those other fuels are that they include their shipping costs, for example, that are very vulnerable to market disruptions. So for example, LNG, the LNG component, in fact, we have a slide there that shows the breakdown of it. LNG has a component of the price called freight cost or shipping cost. Now, that shipping cost could also change if there's a sudden disruption in the market. So not only is LNG susceptible to movements in just one index, Brent immediately, it doesn't have the same features Malampaya na may lag the 6 months, as I described earlier. It's also very vulnerable to shipping problems, shipping rates. So there was one time, in fact, na there was a disruption in the Suez Canal. I think the mababa yung tide, etc., whatever that issue was. So LNG ships had to skirt around. They had to go around the Cape, South Africa, Cape Town thingy. Yeah, Cape of Good Hope, sorry. It had to go out the Cape of Good Hope. And so the shipping cost really escalated by, 5 times. And that increased the cost of LNG. So that's kind of the feature of it, unfortunately. And same for coal, actually, when Indonesia had to cut its supply to the Philippines at the time, I think during the Ukraine war, because they had to implement their own energy security requirement.
That's the all commodities is susceptible to price fluctuations, no? And especially commodities that are imported and comes from different jurisdiction. But my point of the matter there is, if looking at the formula of Malampaya, it's also not completely isolated from price shocks because the components in there is also pegged to crude oil, pegged to gas oil, pegged to US CPI, which is also beyond our control. No? So, in other words, it might be stable, but it's not isolated to price shocks. No? And that's why I think it's important to note that things can change in different situations. No? Right now, we're saying that it's stable, but nobody knows when Dubai crude oil will shoot up, and it will affect also Malampaya pricing. No? So it can be competitive, but it cannot remain competitive all the time because even in this slide that you showed, there are times that LNG will be cheaper, no? Because of different situations. Rin, no? So it's important also to have that price discovery depending on the situation and depending on what's happening around the world. No? Because in my opinion, Malampaya pricing is also susceptible to price shocks because of the formula. No? So that's one thing that notice from the
May
formula.
I just interject?
Yeah.
Before you arrived, I also was asking about that. And I had asked the same resource person, Ms. Donna Cruz, if you include or basically subtract the contribution to government, then that will drastically bring it down. So whatever other price influences there would be, parang the base goes much lower talaga, no? So I don't know, in my mind, how would it ever be more expensive if you will always factor in the contribution to government? Tama ba? O then, you are nodding your head. Let's call on Ms. Sharon.
Well,
And please keep it short,
Yes,
because
very short
we're
lang.
running on his time, which is already
Very short lang.
up.
That's why in the proposed bill, Madam Chair, the proposal is reasonable cost with consideration of the contributions to the national government. We're basically changing EPIRA. Instead na least cost siya, kailangan reasonable cost. And that will be a study of the ERC on how to implement that.
I do not want to, huh? Problem you want? Yeah, sure. Marami. Yeah, okay, I won't rush you. No problem. So, with the permission of Senator Gatchalian, no, because this will not be the last hearing, no, we really want to have a very thorough discussion. This is perfect. It's 3 hours. My brain kind of moves on to another topic after 3 hours. So, we will have another hearing, whether,
Follow-up na answer lang.
as long as mabilis, he also has
Yeah.
Senator Cayetano sa
The-
follow-up.
Senator Gatchalian's points just furthered yung tinatanong ko about August 2. So I just want to know, I saw nodding and everything, but anong inclination ng ERC about the August 2 bid nila? I mean, nasa plate nyo yung rebasing ng Malampaya. We're waiting for the Supreme Court decision. Then after hearing Senator Gatchalian, ang problema sa Malampaya, may formula eh. So they're bound to bid that. Samantalang yung LNG, reference rate lang eh. So parang naging disadvantage pa sa Malampaya kasi kung pwedeng reference rate lang sa Malampaya, kaya lang, kawawa namang consumer, parehong reference rate, di ba? So parang ako, hindi ko alam mangyayari sa bidding nila ng August 2 kung ganyan ang magiging ano nila, no? And we're only talking about 2 weeks, no? Unless we clear the rules within the next 2 weeks, Ma'am Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. We will study it. Hindi pa po nangyari na nagpatigil yung ERC ng CSP, but we
Sige.
will have to
No, I'm
study
more than
it.
happy with studying it, pero lang within that time period. And I'll ask Meralco to do the same. Pakitignan nyo, I mean, given, kasi sa Pateros may saying kami, if it walks like a duck, di ba? Quacks like a duck, swims like a duck, it's a duck eh. So pag tinignan mo yung 1800 at yung 1200, etc., and all the players, etc., medyo boxed out talaga yung Malampaya eh. So let's fix the rules and make it fair to everyone. Yun naman ang ano nung EFIRA eh. No? And sa pagkaalam ko, kulang pa nga yung gina-generate natin lahat sa kailangan eh. So it's a matter of fixing it eh. No? Madam Chair, I'm done, but I think
If I just may quickly
10 seconds,
interject.
because
Yes.
we are beyond. I told all of you, 4 o'clock, okay? So pag na-late ako, isa-isayin ko yung pangalan nyo dun sa pupuntahan ko kung ba't ako late. So please, 10 seconds.
Yes, I would just like to thank Senator Cayetano for raising questions on the
Which Senator
competitiveness.
Cayetano are you thanking?
Both. For this time and for allowing me to raise and for also raising the issues on competitiveness, because we noted and we're also studying the transactions, this CSP, because we know that Meralco's subsidiary Power Gen Corporation and Thermagen together, they purchased 67% stake in the Ilihan Gas Power Plant and the South Premier Power Plant, which won the earlier CSP, which was also in question. So I think there are questions also on if there are violations as far as competitive laws. So we will submit a position paper also on this. That's all, ma'am. Thank you.
So let me end on an observation. I've often chaired hearings. I've veered towards committees which are considered what's the term I'm looking for? More involved in social welfare. So I'm extremely happy that in this committee, which is considered a more technical subject, there are so many women in the field of energy. I just wanted to make that observation. So on that note, I will not belabor this move to suspend, but we will suspend and then we will continue this discussion and a few other topics. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time. We appreciate your input, and I will see you in the next hearing. Maybe, I don't know if it will be end of next week or the following week. Thank you.